Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 10 of Reincarnation of the Businesswoman at School. However, unconsciously, Wang Xinyan wasn't confident while she was saying that. She added, "It's your honor that I'm interested in you." Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting frowned with intense dislike in his eyes because he felt disgusted by Wang Xinyan's words. "This is my man. Stay away from him," Gu Ning threatened, looking at Wang Xinyan coldly. Wang Xinyan was mad and green with envy. She couldn't accept the fact that this extraordinarily handsome man was Gu Ning's boyfriend. "Get out of our way. It's our dinner time, and I'll beat anyone who stands in my way when I'm hungry," Gu Ning added. She didn't want to waste time arguing with Wang Xinyan. Wang Xinyan panicked under pressure from Gu Ning. Leng Xiaoting was afraid that Gu Ning was starving, so he gave them a cold glance and said, "Get out of here right now." Hearing that, Wang Xinyan and her friends were all frightened and left right away. There were two boys in their early 20s, but they weren't as arrogant as Wang Xinyan. Facing Leng Xiaoting, who had an air of great power, they didn't dare to resist at all. After that, Leng Xiaoting looked to the manager. The manager trembled in fear and stammered, I'll tell the waiter to come in now." Then he walked out without delay. All test NOVL on novelben/.cm. Wang Xinyan didn't realize that she had been driven away until she was outside of the private room. She felt so embarrassed, but didn't dare to walk inside and face Leng Xiaoting. "Let's go dine in another restaurant," Wang Xinyan said airily, pretending that she didn't care. "Is she one of the Wang family?" Leng Xiaoting asked Gu Ning, although he already had an affirmative answer himself. "Yes," Gu Ning answered. Leng Xiaoting didn't ask further, but had his own plan. Before long, a waiter came inside. Gu Ning's and Leng Xiaoting's appetite weren't affected by what had just happened, and they ordered all the specialties. When the waiter left, Leng Xiaoting took out a box the size of his palm, handing it to Gu Ning. "This is for you." "What?" Gu Ning was confused. "Is this jewelry again?" she thought to herself, but when she opened the box, she was shocked by what was inside. There was a delicate handgun in the box. "Well, the previous one is just a normal gun, and you can't carry it with you, but you can carry this new one. There is firearm license under it, so it's legal," Leng Xiaoting said. Leng Xiaoting didn't know that Gu Ning always put her gun in her telepathic eye space, and no one would find out, but she was still deeply touched by Leng Xiaoting's considerate behavior. Before Gu Ning could finish, Leng Xiaoting interrupted her. "You don't need to thank me." Since Leng Xiaoting said so, Gu Ning didn't continue, but kissed him lightly on his lips. Leng Xiaoting was turned on by Gu Ning's kiss. If they hadn't been in a public place, Leng Xiaoting wouldn't have let her go easily. Although Wang Xinyan felt frightened under the pressure of Leng Xiaoting, she still called someone to help her beat them. Therefore, when Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning left the restaurant after they finished the meal, they saw that some people were following them. They knew without a doubt that Wang Xinyan must have sent them to get revenge. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting exchanged a knowing glance and walked ahead as usual. They didn't care about those men behind their backs, because they were barely comparable to them. City Ting was a charming ancient town with a beautiful night view and a pleasant bustle. Thus Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting planned to have a tour around, especially on the antique street. They walked towards the underground parking lot, followed by several men. The parking lot was dimly lit and there were few people, thus it was the perfect place for them to attack Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting. The minute that Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting arrived at the parking lot, the men immediately dashed ahead. They surrounded them when they saw that there was no one around. Leng Xiaoting wanted to punch those men, but was stopped by Gu Ning. Gu Ning glanced over the 5 men in her sight and asked slowly, "Did Wang Xinyan send you here?" She already had the answer, but deliberately asked them to collect evidence. A bald man laughed. Since you know who you've annoyed, you should know that you should have stayed away from the Wong family. Oh, then what do you want to do next? Gu Ning asked, but she didn't seem scared at all. Well, Miss Wong ordered us to rape you first, then cut your face with a knife. As for this man, if you agree to be Miss Wong's boyfriend, you can be safe. Otherwise, you'll be ruined too, the bald man said. Ling Xiaoting was in a rage now, especially when they said that they were going to rape Gu Ning. He couldn't wait and kicked the bald man with great force just as he finished his sentence. The bald man was kicked several meters away and fell onto the ground heavily, moaning in pain. It happened too fast for the other 4 men to react. They actually didn't fight a lot and couldn't kick a man away at all. Thus they were all terrified when Ling Xiaoting did that easily before their eyes. Ling Xiaoting fixed his eyes on them like he was going to kill them all. They were trembling in fear and unconsciously stepped backwards to hide. Even then, they couldn't hide from Ling Xiaoting's attack. Within seconds, Ling Xiaoting had punched the 4 men down, and they now all groaned with pain on the ground. Tell Wang Xinyan that if she wants to cause us trouble, she should find some able people. You're merely trash. And tell her to wait for my revenge, because she really annoyed me this time. Gu Ning warned them, then left with Ling Xiaoting. After they were gone, one of those men called Wang Xinyan at once and told her that they failed. Wang Xinyan was mad and snapped at them on the phone. Although Wang Xinyan didn't believe that Gu Ning had the ability to get revenge on her, she felt uneasy to some extent. And her good mood was ruined. Ling Xiaoting looked extremely displeased because of what Wang Xinyan told those men to do to Gu Ning. He would never allow them to do so, but he was annoyed that they had the intention to hurt Gu Ning. I'm fine. Please don't be mad just because of them. Gu Ning didn't want to see Ling Xiaoting being unhappy. They schemed against you, Ling Xiaoting said coldly. He relaxed a little after Gu Ning's comfort, but he was still mad. I'm fine and safe now. They can't hurt me at all. Gu Ning continued to comfort him. I'll handle it, Ling Xiaoting said. No matter who dared to hurt the person that he loved, he would let him or her pay for it. He already had a plan to get revenge on the Wong family. Sure. Gu Ning didn't reject, otherwise Ling Xiaoting would be upset. Ling Xiaoting was finally cheered up because Gu Ning was willing to let him help her. Feeling Ling Xiaoting's emotional change, Gu Ning didn't know what to say but was touched. The two then ambled on the streets in this ancient town, hand in hand like a normal couple. It was winter, so this ancient town wasn't full of activity like it was in summer, but it was still crowded. A beautiful couple like Ling Xiaoting and Gu Ning soon attracted a lot of attention from people around them. Especially when girls noticed Ling Xiaoting, they all marveled at his extraordinarily handsome appearance. Jesus! He's so good-looking. Is he a star or something? I don't think that a star would have a stroll around with his girlfriend. He's so handsome. What a shame that he isn't an actor. Indeed, if he was an actor, he would have a considerable amount of fans. Exactly. I wish that I had such a handsome boyfriend. I think that you should probably be as pretty as the girl beside him first. Hearing all the conversations among those girls, Gu Ning didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, she was proud. Ling Xiaoting didn't like to be the center of people's attention, so he ignored them all. Although antique stands during the night were much less than that during the day, there were still many of them. Gu Ning didn't miss any antique stand on the street, but she didn't walk in the antique shops because she came here to take a chance, not to buy antiques. She enjoyed distinguishing a real antique from fake ones herself. Antiques had been popular for so many years, so there were less real antiques left on the streets. Real antiques were either in antique shops, collected by antique lovers, or placed in museums. Thus Gu Ning didn't find a single real antique after she walked through half of the street. However, when they had almost walked to the end of the street, Gu Ning noticed an antique with power on a stand. It was an 8.5 centimeters tall blue and white glaze bowl, which was worth around 2 million yuan, but Gu Ning only paid 3,000 yuan for it. They didn't go back until 10 p.m., but on their way back, Gu Ning became nervous once she thought of the fact that she was going to stay in the same room as Leng Xiaoting tonight. Before long, they arrived at the hotel. Gao Yi and Xiaoya slept in the factory building tonight, so there were only Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting in this presidential suite now. The minute that they walked inside, Leng Xiaoting locked the door and pressed Gu Ning to him. He kissed her violently, as if he had restricted himself for a long time. Gu Ning was surprised, but she didn't push him away. Instead, she clasped his waist and kissed him back. Leng Xiaoting hadn't seen Gu Ning for days, and now they were finally alone with each other. He couldn't wait to be closer to her. The more passionately Gu Ning kissed him back, the more eagerly Leng Xiaoting wanted her. They slowly moved to the sofa, and he pressed her against the back of the sofa, continuing their kissing. They started to breathe fast, and Leng Xiaoting almost lost his control, but unexpectedly, his phone rang all of a sudden and ruined everything. Leng Xiaoting was mad. Who is calling at this damn time? Gu Ning couldn't help laughing. Answer the phone first. La test novls on, n, vel/.co. Leng Xiaoting understood that there were only a few people who had his number. It had to be important if they called him. He took out his phone. The caller was Su Jinchen. What? Leng Xiaoting said in obvious anger, which scared Su Jinchen. What's wrong with boss? Why is he so mad? Su Jinchen immediately regretted that he called Leng Xiaoting, because he actually had nothing serious to tell him, but he had already called. If he didn't say anything at all, it would be worse, so he stammered, well, boss, where are you now? Just tell me what's wrong, Leng Xiaoting said. Nothing. Nothing is wrong. I was just worried about your safety because you're not back yet, Su Jinchen said. Anything else? Leng Xiaoting asked. He almost lost his patience. No, nothing else. Su Jinchen's voice trembled a little in fear. If you don't have anything serious, don't call me again, Leng Xiaoting said icily before he hung up on Su Jinchen. He was a patient person, but now wasn't the right time and he was being tortured by his sexual desire. Su Jinchen was struck dumb. He thought that his boss's reaction was very abnormal today. Si Ming stepped out of the bathroom, seeing Su Jinchen standing still with a shocked face by the window. He walked over and bumped him lightly. Hey, what's wrong? I just called our boss, Su Jinchen said. And? Where is he and when will he be coming back? Si Ming asked. FIDDEU UPTS on NOV/E/LN.com. No idea. He said that he doesn't want me calling him unless it's serious, Su Jinchen answered. I have a strong feeling that our boss is being very abnormal today. He is easily annoyed. Although Leng Xiaoting always wore a poker face and he was a strict leader, he seldom lost his temper. Therefore, Su Jinchen didn't understand why he suddenly became so easily annoyed. Leng Xiaoting had never been so emotional. Really? Si Ming was surprised. Leng Xiaoting indeed was abnormal these days. Did you call him and ruin his night with some beautiful girl? Si Ming teased. Su Jinchen didn't take it seriously, because both of them knew that it was impossible. However, what they couldn't believe was exactly the truth. While Leng Xiaoting was talking to Su Jinchen on the phone, Gu Ning walked into her room. Leng Xiaoting hung up the call and followed her, walking in. He hugged Gu Ning from her back, rubbing his head gently across her neck and shoulder. His breath made Gu Ning feel itchy. Shouting, "Can you tell me something about your family?" Gu Ning asked. She was suddenly very interested in his family. Although she trusted Ling Shouting and didn't care about his background, she wanted to know more about him. If they knew nothing about each other's family, it might end up hurting their relationship. Hearing that, Ling Shouting's body stiffened a little. Apparently, he didn't want to talk about it. Gu Ning sensed his unusual reaction and explained at once, "It's totally fine if you don't want to talk about it." Gu Ning had a feeling that Ling Shouting didn't like his family, so she wouldn't force him. "It's fine," Ling Shouting said lightly. He understood that Gu Ning just wanted to know more about him. Although he was reluctant to mention them, he was willing to tell Gu Ning. Ling Shouting's grandpa, Ling Weihua, was the head of the Ling family. His second uncle, Ling Yuanqian, and his second aunt, Jiang Shuyuan, had a son and a daughter. Their son, Ling Xiaomin, was 25 years old and was half a year younger than Ling Shouting and already had a job. Their daughter, Ling Xiaojia, was 23 years old and had just graduated from university half a year ago. His third uncle, Ling Yuanjin, and his third aunt, Yuyin, also had a son and a daughter. Their daughter was Ling Shaoxi, who was 20 years old and was studying in the capital university as a sophomore. Their son was named Ling Shaoxuan. He was an 18-year-old senior student in a high school. His youngest aunt, Ling Yuanjin, and his youngest uncle, Song Wenshuan, only had a 13-year-old daughter, who was a student in grade 7 and was called Song Yinhua. When Gu Ning heard Ling Weihua's name, she was astonished. In her previous incarnation, she grew up in the capital and was naturally familiar with those influential names. Gu Ning knew that Ling Shouting was from a powerful family, but to her astonishment, his family was much more powerful than she thought. The Ling family was the leader of the 4 most influential families in the capital. Ling Weihua's father was one of the founding fathers of this country, and all the members of the Ling family were in important positions in politics. Ling Shouting didn't mention his parents because they had passed away when Ling Shouting was only a child. Ling Shouting's parents died because of their work, which Gu Ning was also aware of in her previous incarnation. Seeing Gu Ning being so shocked, Ling Shouting was worried that she would leave him because of his family. "Well, your family is so influential, but I'm just an ordinary girl. Will your family approve of our relationship?" Gu Ning deliberately asked. In fact, she didn't care if there were troubles ahead of them, and Ling Shouting's attitude mattered most to her. As long as Ling Shouting was willing to be with her, she didn't care if his family disagreed. Moreover, Gu Ning believed that she had a bright future and that she was able to stand by Ling Shouting's side. "Don't worry. No one can interfere in my personal affairs. As long as I love you, my grandpa won't disagree. And other than my grandpa, we don't need to care about the rest of the Ling family. If they ever annoy you, you can fight back as you like. I'll support you," Ling Shouting said. Hearing that, Gu Ning figured out that Ling Shouting didn't have a good relationship with the other members in his family, but she was touched that he was willing to stand up for her against them. "Who knows what's going to happen in the future," Gu Ning teased. Hearing that, Ling Shouting was nervous. He was concerned that Gu Ning would leave him one day. Thus he bent his back and pressed her tightly against his body, looking straight into her eyes. "Don't you want to be with me? Did I do anything wrong? Please don't leave me." Seeing Ling Shouting being so anxious, Gu Ning felt a little guilty. "Yes, of course I want to be with you. You've done nothing wrong. I was just kidding." Gu Ning was regretful that she teased Ling Shouting after she found out about his family background. The man lacked security, and she should never do that. She blamed herself. After that, Gu Ning kissed Ling Shouting's lips to comfort him. Although Gu Ning explained that she was just kidding, Ling Shouting was still afraid that she would leave him. Therefore, he kissed her back with great force to feel her existence. The kiss was increasingly passionate and made them want more and more. Gradually, they were controlled by the strong sexual desire that they felt towards each other. They had already taken off their coats when they walked into the room, and now they only had their tight sweaters on. Although Gu Ning was only 18, she had ample breasts. This was the first time that she had even been touched by a man. Her body was trembling slightly in excitement, but she didn't resist because she was prepared. However, at this moment, Lin Xiaoting stopped all of a sudden. He tried his best to get his reason back. Ning Ning, I. He was afraid that he would hurt Gu Ning, but he wanted her so much right now. Xiaoting, I want you as well. Although Gu Ning was also turned on, she knew what she was saying and doing. Having Gu Ning's affirmative answer, Lin Xiaoting lost all of his reason. He thrust inside her body like a hungry beast that had finally caught its prey. Gu Ning wanted to moan in pain, but restricted herself. This was her first time, and she knew that it could be painful, so she had been mentally prepared. Lin Xiaoting understood that Gu Ning could be hurt, so he moved slowly once he was inside of her. As time went by, it got more and more comfortable for her. They had been doing it for a long time, and Gu Ning started to feel tired. She had to admit that Lin Xiaoting had incredible stamina. Isn't he tired at all? After they finished, it was 3 a.m. in the morning, and they lay cuddled together as they went to sleep. When Gu Ning woke up, Lin Xiaoting was absent from the bed. It was quiet, but Gu Ning knew that Lin Xiaoting was still here. She secretly used her jade eyes and found that Lin Xiaoting was cooking. Get the latest chapters on n/velbin.com. What they had done throughout last night flashed through her mind, and Gu Ning flushed with happiness, but she was slightly mad too. She hadn't understood what a wolf in sheep's clothing was until now. Lin Xiaoting looked like he practiced self-restraint normally, but immediately turned out to be a hungry wolf in bed. If she hadn't had the power to protect herself, she probably would have fainted. Checking the marks left by Lin Xiaoting on her body, Gu Ning flushed again. Although she could use her power to remove those marks, she didn't do so because they were signs of their love. It was winter, so she could easily hide it with clothes. Gu Ning got up and went to have a shower. She changed her clothing before leaving the bedroom. Lin Xiaoting had already prepared breakfast when Gu Ning came out. Watching Gu Ning, he flushed a little too, because they had spent a whole night making love. And it was also his first time. Good morning, Lin Xiaoting said, pulling a chair out for Gu Ning. Good morning. Gu Ning felt too shy to look straight into his eyes, so she directly walked to the dining table. The two then sat across the dining table having their breakfast together. No one said a word, but Lin Xiaoting's gaze fell on Gu Ning once in a while. He was searching for something. Gu Ning felt slightly uncomfortable and asked, "What are you looking for?" Lin Xiaoting felt that it was embarrassing to say it out loud, but after a few seconds, he still asked with care, "Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Lin Xiaoting didn't know that Gu Ning had her power to protect herself, and he understood that it could be painful during the first time. Gu Ning blushed once more. Although they had already slept with each other, she felt shy to bring it up. I am a little tired and it's just a little painful." In fact, she had used her power to relieve the pain, and felt much better now. Hearing that, Lin Xiaoting felt a little guilty and apologized, "Sorry, I just couldn't stop last night." "Then you can restrain yourself the next time." Gu Ning planned to comfort Lin Xiaoting, but once she said it out loud, it sounded like she was looking forward to the next time. "Sure I will," Lin Xiaoting said. Even if Gu Ning didn't say it, he would be more careful the next time. Gu Ning remained silent, eating her breakfast. At this time, Lin Xiaoting received Su Jinshan's call. After Ling Xiaoting's warning, Su Jinchen now only called his boss when he had something serious. It was about the task they were going to fulfill this time, so Ling Xiaoting left after he hung up. However, before he left, he reminded Gu Ning to take care, because he couldn't stop her from going out. Once she went out, he would be worried about her safety in City Tang. When Ling Xiaoting was gone, Gu Ning called the owner of the factory building. They were going to finish the legal procedure today. It was already 9 a.m., and they should finish it in the morning. Gu Ning and the owner agreed to meet at the real estate bureau, and it only took them half an hour to finish the legal procedure. Afterwards, Gu Ning called Jinping. They planned to acquire raw materials from the Wang family later. Jinping was waiting for Gu Ning's call and was ready to set out at any time. Thus Gu Ning took a taxi heading to the street of stone gambling without delay. On the way, Gu Ning received Ling Xiaoting's call. He told her that the registration would be settled this afternoon. Gu Ning was astonished by his efficiency, but thinking of Ling Xiaoting's background, Gu Ning believed that he could make it happen. Jinping's store was being redecorated when Gu Ning arrived. His store wasn't very big, so it wouldn't take much time. They only lacked a counter, sofa, desks and other furniture now. They would change the store board when that furniture was delivered here. For now, Jinping only needed to go buy raw materials with Gu Ning. The Wang family's raw material warehouse wasn't far away from the street of stone gambling, and they arrived after only 4 minutes of driving. It was a 3,400 square meter factory area with 3 buildings. It wasn't large but was built by the Wang family, so they owned it. Except for raw materials, the Wang family was also involved in jewelry, clothing, electronic equipment and so forth. Their manufacturing factories were all in this area. The raw material warehouse was in the underground room of Building A. It was about 7 square meters in size and consisted of 4 small areas, A, B, C and D. The price of raw materials varied from small area to small area. Although all of the raw materials had been selected and classified, it didn't mean that there were only low-quality raw materials in a low-price area. Purchasers could choose raw materials one by one, but those raw materials were all piled up, so it was difficult for them to pick the bottom ones. In that case, most people could only get the raw materials on the top. However, Gu Ning was different. She already had bad blood with the Wang family. Thus she wouldn't miss any raw material with jade inside. There were around 10,000 raw materials in each pile, but only over 100 of them contained jade, and most of the jade was of low quality. This time, Gu Ning planned to buy all the raw materials with jade above medium level. She let Jinping push the cart while she was choosing the raw materials. Gu Ning picked raw materials at a high speed. It seemed like she didn't pick it all, but those workers in the factory didn't say anything even though Gu Ning turned raw materials all over. They didn't believe that she could cut out jade. Jinping had mixed emotions. Although Gu Ning told him that she had special skills of stone gambling, he couldn't help doubting the possibility that she was able to cut out jade. Most importantly, Gu Ning was going to run a raw material provider. They had to cut out a large amount of jade. Nevertheless, Jinping didn't say anything because Gu Ning was his boss. Within 2 hours, Gu Ning took out all the raw materials with jade above medium level. She got over 1,300 raw materials in all, 20 of which contained top-level jade, 70 had high-level jade, around 300 contained medium-high-level jade, over 400 had medium-level jade and the rest all contained medium-low-level jade. The aggregate price of the raw materials wasn't very high because they bought them directly from the factory. In addition, they needed 2 medium-sized trucks to deliver all of the raw materials. There were many trucks in the Wang family's factory, and it was free to deliver goods within City Tang. When they were back at their own factory building, Gu Ning called Gao Yi and Xiaoya to help them move raw materials. Gao Yi and Xiaoya were both shocked when they saw the 2 trucks which were filled with raw materials. Xingping, meanwhile, rounded his eyes in shock at seeing the factory building. Boss, did you rent this whole building? It's too large. Xingping knew that normally businessmen would rent a whole building for convenience, but it was enough for them to cut out raw materials even if they only rented a big room. I didn't rent it. I bought it, Gu Ning said. What? You bought it? Xingpeng was astonished. To his surprise, Gu Ning was rich enough to buy the whole building. Afterwards, they put all the raw materials into the underground space. There were 4 warehouses on the basement floor. 3 of them were small warehouses, occupying around 100 square meters in all, and each of them was around 30 square meters, while the number 1 warehouse was 300 square meters in size. Gu Ning told them to place all the raw materials into the number 4 warehouse. While they were moving raw materials, Gu Ning secretly put raw materials which contained jade with strong power into her telepathic eye space and replaced them with other raw materials, but she still left several raw materials with top-level jade outside. At the same time, there were only raw materials with high-level and top-level jade in her telepathic eye space. After they moved all the raw materials into the warehouse, Gu Ning introduced them to each other before they went to dine together. During the meal, Xingpeng finally asked Gu Ning, "Boss, are you sure that there's a large amount of jade inside those raw materials?" Gu Ning smiled. She understood that Xingpeng had been confused for a long time. We'll find out when we cut them. Although Gu Ning herself was certain, she preferred to let them see the results with their own eyes. Since Gu Ning said so, Xingpeng didn't ask further. After the meal, Xingpeng went back to continue redecorating his store. Gu Ning, instead, called Zhang Diqing and told him that she was busy acquiring raw materials. She just got a large amount of raw materials from the Wang family, and she immediately called the Zhang family. In fact, she was in a hurry, but she didn't know how long she would be staying in City Tang, so she wanted to settle it as soon as possible. Zhang Diqing had already retired and handed the family business to his son, so he was always free now. He told Gu Ning the address of their warehouses and went to meet her at once. After that, Gu Ning left along with Gao Yi and Xiao Ye. The Zhang family's warehouse wasn't far from the Street of Stone Gambling either, but it was in the opposite direction of the Wang family's warehouse. The Zhang family's warehouses were also in a separate building like the Wang family's, but it was a little smaller. They had 3 buildings too, 2 of which were factories, while the last one was a staff dormitory. When Gu Ning arrived, Master Zhang was already waiting outside of the factory. Seeing Gu Ning, Zhang Diqing immediately got out of his car and welcomed her. "So nice to meet you, Miss Gu." "Master Zhang, I'm so sorry to make you wait," Gu Ning apologized. "It's fine. I just arrived as well. Let's go in now," Zhang Diqing said, then guided Gu Ning and others walking inside. With Zhang Diqing as their guide, they didn't need to register, and walked in without any trouble. The Zhang family's raw materials were also divided into 4 classes, A, B, C and D. However, Gu Ning didn't plan to do the same thing as what she had done in the Wang family's warehouses, because she intentionally got revenge on the Wang family. As for the Zhang family, Gu Ning wouldn't take away all the raw materials with jade. She decided to take half of the raw materials which contained jade above medium level. Visit novilbin.c/m for the L-test updates. In the end, Gu Ning took over 400 raw materials in all, among which only 300 raw materials contained jade. There were around 20 raw materials with top-level jade, 40 with high-level jade, 60 with medium-high-level jade, and all the rest were raw materials with medium-level jade. All of them cost Gu Ning 30 million yuan, and Zhang Diqing gave Gu Ning a discount. Gu Ning's group then went back to their warehouse. When they moved the raw materials into their factory building, Gu Ning didn't dump the waste raw materials because it would be so abnormal if there was no waste at all in her raw materials. Although it was already extremely shocking that there were only 70 waste raw materials among hundreds of raw materials, it was more acceptable if there were some waste raw materials rather than if there were none. After they moved all the raw materials inside, it was 4:30 p.m., and Gu Ning called Xingping right away. The minute the call was answered, Gu Ning heard a round of noisy conversation from the other side. Some people were talking about colorful jade provider. "Hi, boss," Xingping said. "Hi, Uncle Xing, how is the store going?" Gu Ning asked. "We just finished, and there are many people gathering around outside of our office looking for cooperation." Xingpeng was a little excited. Although he understood that jade, instead of deals, was always the most important element in jade provision, he was happy to see that many businessmen couldn't wait to cooperate with them even before their opening day. It was a good beginning after all. "Very well. Just tell them that we'll start to provide jade from tomorrow. They can come and have a look in the afternoon. And now you need to bring the 2 workers to cut the raw materials in the Henyuan factory area as soon as possible," Gu Ning ordered. "No problem," Xingping answered. Afterwards, Xingping along with the 2 workers drove to Henyuan factory area. During the break, Gu Ning said to Gao Yi and Xiaoye, "Xingping will be in charge of my jade provider, and the New Year festival is only 17 days away. I will probably go to the capital, and you can stay here for now to assist Xingping. When I fly back to City F from the capital, you can come to my place and we can spend the New Year festival together." Hearing that, both Gao Yi and Xiaoye were touched. They almost cried. In fact, the two had spent the New Year festival together many times and it had been nothing different or special from normal days, but they missed the feelings of home. Gu Ning now suddenly invited them to go to her place to spend this year's New Year festival with her family. Gao Yi and Xiaoye were excited and full of anticipation, but they were worried that it would bother their boss's family. Thinking of that, Xiaoye asked Gu Ning, "Boss, will it be a bother?" "Not at all. There are only 5 people in my family, namely my mom, aunt, uncle, my cousin and I. And now you both follow my lead, so you naturally should be with me. I'll arrange assignments for you after the New Year festival," Gu Ning said. "Sure," Gao Yi and Xiaoye agreed. Before Xingpeng and the 2 workers arrived, Gu Ning began to cut the raw materials herself. She also taught Gao Yi and Xiaoye how to cut stones so that they could help her. Although they only had a few people who knew how to cut stones, Gu Ning had no intention to hire more workers because she wanted to keep it quiet. Those 2 workers had been working for Xingping for a long time, so they were trustworthy, but if they ever dared to break her rules, Gu Ning would punish them without hesitation. She of course had warned them beforehand. It was the first time that Gao Yi and Xiaoye had ever cut stones, but with their outstanding learning and hands-on ability, they were soon able to do it well. Gu Ning drew lines for them first, and all they needed to do was to cut following the lines. 20 minutes later, Xingping arrived. They had already met each other before when Gu Ning had given Xingping a helping hand the other day. One of the 2 workers was around 50 years old, while the other was around 40 years old. The older one was called Li Quanqing and the younger one was called Zhang Jingguang. Both of them had worked for Xingpeng for at least 7 years. Xingpeng told Zhang Jingguang and Li Quanqing about what Gu Ning had done yesterday, and both of them were surprised to find out that Gu Ning was so young. And she even ran a jade provider at such a young age. It was universally acknowledged that jade was very hard to get, especially high-quality jade. Therefore, jade was always sold out within a short time. Why was Gu Ning so confident? However, Gu Ning had easily settled the mess in which the Qing gang was involved, so they believed that Gu Ning wasn't simple. After Xingpeng's introduction, Li Quanqing and Zhang Jingguang greeted Gu Ning with great respect. "Nice to meet you, boss." "Nice to meet you both too," Gu Ning said politely, but she intentionally wore a serious face to remind them that although she was young, she was still their boss. After a second, Gu Ning added, "Let me be honest with you. If you're loyal to me, I'll treat you well and give you a high salary in this industry. However, if you dare to betray me, you'll pay for what you've done." Gu Ning threatened plainly. Li Quanqing and Zhang Jingguang were both scared because they had the feeling that Gu Ning was a doer, not a talker. "Boss, please don't worry. You have our loyalty," Li Quanqing and Zhang Jingguang immediately said. They were upright people, and since they decided to follow Gu Ning's lead, they wouldn't betray her, even if she was only a teenager. Moreover, they understood that Gu Ning had powerful support. And they were merely ordinary citizens, so they naturally didn't dare to act against her. "Very well," Gu Ning said. After that, they drove into the factory area together. Before long, Gu Ning guided them to the factory building. Once they were near to the factory building, they heard the noise of stone cutting. The sound insulation of this factory building wasn't very good, but wasn't bad either. Although it was noisy, nobody could hear it outside. In addition, factories were always noisy. They went up to the second floor and noticed raw materials placed all around on the ground. There was a man and a woman busy cutting stones, and many pieces of jade were already cut out, which shocked Xingpeng's group. Seeing them being shocked, Gu Ning explained, "It's too early for you to be shocked now. Most of those raw materials contain jade, and there are few waste raw materials. We also have more raw materials in the basement." "What?" Hearing that, they were more than shocked. None of them could believe their ears now. This was the first time that they had ever seen such a large amount of raw materials, and most of them contained jade. Normally, one could only cut out 2 to 10 pieces of jade from hundreds of raw materials, but Gu Ning told them that most of those raw materials on the ground contained jade, which was impossible in their eyes. Li Quanqing and Zhang Jingguang couldn't help to doubt its authenticity. Gu Ning understood why they had doubt. "I can only tell you I have my own special skills of stone gambling. Please keep it a secret because I don't want to be involved in trouble." "Sure, boss," they promised at once. Although they were all curious about Gu Ning's mysterious skills of stone gambling, they didn't ask further because Gu Ning was their boss. "We'll try our best to cut out as many pieces of jade as possible today, and we'll sell them tomorrow. From now on, we have 2 ways of sale. First, we directly put our jade on sale once a week. The amount is limited to 5 pieces, including only 1 piece of high-level or top-level jade and 2 pieces of medium-high-level jade every time. And the rest are medium-level jade, because it's much easier to cut out medium-level jade. Second, we can supply jewelry businessmen with 1 to 3 pieces of jade monthly. We don't promise that we can provide high-level and above jade every time, but we can give each of those jewelry businessmen medium-low-level and medium-level jade. In that case, jewelry businessmen have to sign a contract with us beforehand, and they have to acquire jade from us every month for 2 years. The amount isn't limited. If they fail to do so, they break the rule and have to pay us liquidated damages." Gu Ning limited the amount of jade that they were going to sell for a reason. She planned to run the company for a long time. And she wanted to build long-term cooperation with those jewelry businessmen. If jewelry businessmen acquired a considerable amount of jade at once, they would stop buying for a long period. And during that period, Gu Ning's company would barely stay afloat if they had no deals to settle. Most importantly, it was universally known that jade was hard to cut out. If everyone knew that they could easily cut out a large amount of jade, they could be in trouble. In addition, Gu Ning already had dozens of name cards from different jewelry businessmen. If they were all going to sign a contract with Gu Ning then had to provide them with dozens of pieces of jade every month in all, which was quite a lot. Gu Ning already had hundreds of raw materials which contained jade, but it was only enough for half a year at the most. Xingpeng and others all bore Gu Ning's words in mind. After that, they all started to cut those raw materials. In the beginning, Li Quanqing and Zhang Jingguang were amazed by the amount of jade they cut out continuously. It took them a long while to get used to it. Meanwhile, the news that Xingpeng's store had now become colorful jade provider office went across the street of stone gambling. People were all astonished. Xing Hao, who was Xingpeng's adopted son, heard about it as well. He had already escaped to another city after he failed to pay the usury, but now he immediately went back, trying to gain benefits from Xingpeng's new business. The Zhang family, Wang family and the Liu family also heard of the news. All of them were confused about the source of Xingpeng's jade. Even they couldn't cut out enough pieces of jade to supply those jewelry businessmen. At the same time, they all wanted to see how long Xingpeng could run the jade provider. Especially the Wang family and the Liu family, both of them hoped that Xingpeng would fail, because if Xingpeng succeeded, they would lose the market. When it was almost 6 p.m., Gu Ning told Xiaoya to buy takeout. Tomorrow was the opening day, so they needed to work overtime to cut out more pieces of jade. The opening ceremony wouldn't be grand this time because a jade provider aimed at jewelry businessmen only, instead of common consumers. Gu Ning already had many name cards of representatives of different jewelry companies, so it was easy to contact them. Even if she didn't have their numbers, they would come without delay once they found out that she had jade on sale because it was so hard to cut out jade. Moreover, many jewelry businessmen already came to Xingpeng's store looking for cooperation today, so Gu Ning wasn't worried about deals at all. They decided to open tomorrow the minute that they got the legal documents. Leng Xiaoting had told her that he would bring the legal documents to her tomorrow. Thinking of Leng Xiaoting, Gu Ning couldn't help missing him a lot. Although she knew that Leng Xiaoting was excellent, she was still worried about his own safety. Gaoyi, Xiaoya, Gu Ning and others continued to cut the raw materials until 11 p.m. It was very late already, so Gu Ning told them to go back home. They put the jade that they had cut out into a safe and only Gu Ning, Gaoyi, Xiaoya and Xingpeng knew its password. Gaoyi and Xiaoya were going to stay in City Ting for a while longer, so they would stay in this factory building temporarily. It also made it more convenient for them to continue working in the following days. Your F48 stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. Gu Ning naturally was pleased if they were willing to stay in the factory building. In that case, she could be alone with Leng Xiaoting when he got back. Thus in the end, Gu Ning went back to the hotel alone. Before Gu Ning left, she reminded Xingpeng and the others to prepare their 1-inch ID photos to make a pass. Xingpeng proposed to send Gu Ning home, but was declined. He knew that Gu Ning was excellent at kung fu and could protect herself well, so he didn't insist. Gu Ning then got in a taxi and left alone. However, while driving on a quiet road, she noticed that 3 luxury cars were stopped at the roadside. There were 7 boys and girls standing to the side. One of the girls was pushing another girl, who was Gu Ning's age, in an angry way. Gu Ning immediately recognized that the first girl was Wang Xinyan. However, the girl who was being pushed by Wang Xinyan with great force didn't resist at all. She remained silent and tolerated Wang Xinyan's violent behavior. Even though Wang Xinyan slapped her, she only glared at Wang Xinyan, but still didn't resist. "Aren't you good at fighting? Why don't you fight back? If you dare to do so, I'll force your whole family to leave City Ting," Wang Xinyan said arrogantly. Gu Ning was greatly displeased to hear that. She told the taxi driver to stop right away. "Miss, I think you better stay out of it." The taxi driver didn't stop, but persuaded Gu Ning to ignore them. Actually, the taxi driver did nothing wrong. It wasn't everyone's obliged duty to help others on the street after all. "Stop the car," Gu Ning said coldly. The driver was a little frightened and the taxi came to an abrupt halt. Since Gu Ning had already made up her mind to help the girl, she wouldn't regret. "Miss," the taxi driver still tried to prevent Gu Ning from being hurt. However, Gu Ning ignored him and took out a 50 yuan bill, giving it to him. Without asking for change, Gu Ning opened the car door and walked to the group of boys and girls. The taxi driver didn't say anything else, but drove away. Where Gu Ning got out of the car was just 10 meters away from them, so they saw her the minute that she got out. Especially Wang Xinyan, she was displeased the moment that she recognized Gu Ning. She had tried to hurt Gu Ning by hiring hoodlums to attack her, but failed. Gu Ning even threatened to revenge herself on her. Wang Xinyan was irritated, but didn't believe that Gu Ning was able to do so. Besides, she was very jealous of Gu Ning because of her extraordinarily handsome boyfriend. Wang Xinyan actually didn't know Gu Ning's background, but since she showed up by herself and was alone, Wang Xinyan decided to attack her again. What? Do you want to get involved? Wang Xinyan looked at Gu Ning in a vicious way. What if I say yes? Gu Ning said. Well, you'll pay for your stupid decision. You escaped last time because of the man beside you, but this time, you're doomed. Wang Xinyan said in anger, then looked back to her friends. Hey, this girl has annoyed me, and you all have to help me punch her. Hearing that, 2 boys and 4 girls immediately walked towards Gu Ning. Hey, did you annoy Xinyan? Who do you think you are? How dare you annoy Xinyan? Although normally I don't beat girls, Stop talking bullshit. If you want to fight, do it right now. Gu Ning interrupted with impatience. They were all mad. Since you want to die today, we can help you. A boy snapped at Gu Ning and wanted to slap her. However, when he just raised his hand, a slim arm caught him. It wasn't Gu Ning, but the girl who had been bullied. To Gu Ning's surprise, the girl could stop the boy and moved fast. Yan Shuya, let me go, the boy ordered. The girl, whose name was Yan Shuya, remained silent, but seized the boy's hand tightly. Yan Shuya, how dare you? Aren't you afraid that your whole family will be forced to leave City Tang? Wang Xinyan threatened in anger. Yan Shuya still didn't say a word, but Gu Ning opened her mouth and said to Yan Shuya, if you're worried about being involved in trouble, you can step back and leave them to me. Your F48 stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. Gu Ning could tell that Yan Shuya had learned Kung Fu, and that she was much better than ordinary people in Kung Fu. Do you think I can step back from this mess? Yan Shuya asked sadly before she kicked out at the boy's stomach. The boy fell down on the ground and moaned in pain. Yan Shuya couldn't tolerate it anymore. Although she was truly scared of the Wang family, she refused to endlessly be humiliated by Wang Xinyan. How dare you kick Fei? The others were all surprised by Yan Shuya's sudden reaction. Yan Shuya's family only ran a small kung fu club and was barely comparable with the Wang family. So what? Yan Shuya was also mad. After that, those boys and girls ran to attack Yan Shuya altogether. Without Gu Ning's help, Yan Shuya alone would have been able to handle all of them, but Gu Ning wouldn't stand aside and do nothing, so she immediately helped Yan Shuya. Within seconds, Gu Ning and Yan Shuya beat them all down on the ground. Wang Xinyan was angry and in pain, but couldn't defeat them. Wang Xinyan, I know you family is influential in City Tang, so I've tolerated your behavior for a long time, but you never stop. If you dare to hurt my family, I'll kill you. Yan Shuya had already lost her reason and threatened Wang Xinyan without even knowing what she was saying. How dare you? Wang Xinyan was used to thinking that she was better than others. I will. Yan Shuya clenched her teeth and replied word by word. Wang Xinyan was annoyed, but she didn't dare to say anything now, because Yan Shuya had been practicing Kung Fu since she had been a kid. Wang Xinyan couldn't win in a fight against Yan Shuya. Let's leave now, Yan Shuya said, and pulled Gu Ning, walking ahead. Gu Ning didn't resist, but followed her. Yan Shuya didn't stop until they were far away from them. She looked at Gu Ning and thanked her. Thank you so much for helping me. Find the new st ovals on n/velben.com. You had no intention to beat them, but you did it after I showed up. Now they will probably try to revenge themselves on you. Don't you blame me for that? Gu Ning asked. Gu Ning understood that she caused Yan Shuya more trouble, and felt guilty. I know that you were just being kind, and I indeed couldn't tolerate it anymore. I don't care if they're going to get revenge on me, Yan Shuya said airily, but she seemed worried. Since Gu Ning was already involved, she wouldn't leave Yan Shuya alone. Gu Ning took out her name card, handing it to Yan Shuya. We have the same enemy. If she really causes you trouble in the future, you can call me. I'll help you. Thanks. Yan Shuya didn't reject, but she wouldn't bother Gu Ning either. After that, they separated. When Gu Ning was finally back in her room, it was almost 12 a.m. She still hadn't received a message from Leng Xiaoting yet, and she had no idea whether he would be back tonight. Right when Gu Ning was ready to go to bed, her phone rang. It was Leng Xiaoting, and Gu Ning answered it at once. Open the door. I'm outside, Leng Xiaoting said. Gu Ning immediately jumped out of bed, running to open the door. She hadn't realized that she wanted to see Leng Xiaoting so badly. When Gu Ning opened the door, she met Leng Xiaoting's eyes. At that moment, they shared the same excitement, as if they hadn't seen each other for ages. However, the next moment, Leng Xiaoting's sight fell on Gu Ning's ample breasts. She was wearing a loose bathrobe and her ample breasts were half bared to the air. Gu Ning flushed and covered her chest with her hands, turning back and running to her bedroom. Leng Xiaoting instantly walked inside and locked the door, following Gu Ning to the bedroom. Gu Ning jumped into the bed and covered herself tightly with the quilt. She knew that Leng Xiaoting was behind her, but didn't look back. Leng Xiaoting threw the folder in his hands onto the bedside table and removed his coat. After that, the two shared a passionate night together again. Gu Ning felt so happy and warm Leng Xiaoting's arms. She felt like she already had everything that she wanted in her life. Thinking of what they had done throughout last night, Gu Ning blushed and beamed. She had to admit that Leng Xiaoting's body was extraordinarily alluring. Although she felt shy looking straight at him, she couldn't help giving glances at his body. Seeing that, Leng Xiaoting smiled a little and teased, "Are you satisfied?" Gu Ning flushed more, and immediately moved her gaze away, and then Leng Xiaoting pulled her into his arms once more. They cuddled together in the bed and didn't want to get up. After a long while, Leng Xiaoting got up to make breakfast for Gu Ning. It's still early now, and you can sleep for a while longer, Leng Xiaoting said to Gu Ning. She might be exhausted after they had sex countless times. Gu Ning didn't move, or get up, because she indeed felt tired. Leng Xiaoting gave her a light kiss before walking out. Gu Ning rolled onto her back and fell asleep again. In order to not wake Gu Ning up, Leng Xiaoting moved quietly while he was making breakfast. About an hour later, Gu Ning smelled the pleasant scent of meat, which made her hungry. She woke up at once and got up to take a shower. After a while, she walked out of the bedroom. Leng Xiaoting was almost finished preparing the breakfast, which consisted of many nutritious foods. It's hard to find a man who can cook nowadays. I think I'm a lucky girl. Gu Ning complimented him. This wasn't her first time eating food prepared by Leng Xiaoting, so she knew that he was good at cooking. He was even better at cooking than she was. As long as you like it, I'll cook for you every day. Leng Xiaoting beamed. Very well. Gu Ning was of course happy to hear that. Ling Xiaoting was in fact more than willing to cook for the girl that he loved. After breakfast, Ling Xiaoting handed a folder to Gu Ning. All the legal documents that she needed were inside. "Are you busy today?" Gu Ning asked. "Nope, I can keep you company today," Ling Xiaoting replied. "Excellent," Gu Ning said. Afterwards, they went out together. However, the minute they walked out of the entrance of the hotel, they were stopped by 5 policemen with electric batons in their hands. One of them took out a photo to show it in front of Gu Ning's eyes and said, "Someone accused you of attacking them, so you need to follow us to the police station now." The photo was a screenshot from a dashboard camera, in which Gu Ning's face was pretty clear so that she couldn't deny it. Of course, Gu Ning never thought to deny it either. "Don't you dare!" Ling Xiaoting immediately protected Gu Ning by standing in front of her. His cold glance was as sharp as a knife and frightened the policeman. It was impossible to take Gu Ning away from Ling Xiaoting's side. He believed that Gu Ning beat them for a reason, and he would protect her no matter what happened. However, at this moment, Gu Ning's phone rang. It was a strange number from City Tang, and Gu Ning immediately thought that it must be Yan Shuya, so she answered it at once. "Hi. Miss Gu, the policeman came to arrest me. I think they'll come to you soon. Please hide as soon as possible," Yan Shuya said in a hurry. "It's too late. They already found me," Gu Ning answered, but she wasn't afraid or nervous at all. "What?" Yan Shuya was surprised. "Fine, just take care of yourself. Don't worry. It'll be fine. See you at the police station," Gu Ning said. "Okay," Yan Shuya replied. For some reason she believed in Gu Ning. If she said that it would be fine, it would be fine. The policemen felt humiliated and were mad because Ling Xiaoting stopped them, especially the policeman who held the photo in his hand. He snapped, "It is interfering with police duties if you stand in our way. Bring him as well." Ling Xiaoting heard the conversation that Gu Ning had with Yan Shuya, so he didn't resist, but he wouldn't allow the policeman to touch Gu Ning. In the end, Gu Ning along with Ling Xiaoting got in the police car. When they arrived at the police station, Yan Shuya was already there, in the hearing room. Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting were sent into the same hearing room as Yan Shuya. The police had no intention to separate them. To be specific, they had no interest to hear their account at all, because they had already sentenced them as guilty before they even went to arrest them. Yan Shuya was disappointed when Gu Ning walked inside, because she thought that Gu Ning would help her out, but now they were both in trouble. Gu Ning told her that it would be fine, but it seemed worse now. However, Yan Shuya was not blaming Gu Ning. Instead, she felt helpless. Gu Ning noticed that Yan Shuya was a little disappointed, but she didn't care because she indeed did nothing till now. Meanwhile, a policeman in his early 30s came in. He was the leader of this police station, and was called Wang Jilin. He was a distant cousin of the Wang family. Although he was only a distant cousin of the Wang family, others would also respect him because of the Wang family's influence. Wang Jilin would do absolutely anything to please the Wang family. He walked to the table with pieces of paper in his hands and slapped the papers heavily onto it. "Sign it." Gu Ning gave it a glance. Those pieces of paper said that they were guilty of beating people. As long as they signed, the crime would be established, and they would be sentenced to half a year in prison. Article 9 of the Law on Public Security Administration Punishment stipulated that for violations of public security management behaviors caused by civil disputes or damage to other people's property, the public security organization could mediate if it wasn't severe. Vi sit en velben, cm for EU ovals. If the parties reached an agreement through mediation by the public security organization, they wouldn't be punished. However, if the mediation failed to reach an agreement or failed to fulfill the agreement, the public security organization should, in accordance with the provisions of this law, impose penalties on those who violated the public security management. They would inform the parties that they might file a civil lawsuit and hand it to the People's Court according to the law. However, those people had only been hurt lightly last night in the fight, which wasn't severe. And the police station didn't meditate at all. Instead, they wanted to sentence Gu Ning along with Yan Shuya to prison as soon as possible. Gu Ning understood that it had to be the Wang family's order. Yan Shuya's family was barely comparable to the Wang family in City Tang. And they didn't know Gu Ning's or Ling Xiaoting's background, so they did whatever they wanted. Besides, they didn't believe that Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting had powerful support. Gu Ning found it interesting and asked the policeman, "Are you sure that this police station has the right to sentence us to prison directly?" "So what? Do you know who you've annoyed?" The Wang family is one of the most influential families in City Tang, and they can do whatever they want in this place, Wang Jilin sneered with disdain. "Really? What if we refuse to sign it?" Gu Ning asked calmly as usual. "Do you think you can resist?" Wang Jilin asked arrogantly. "Well, I don't think that you have the ability to force us to sign," Gu Ning said coldly all of a sudden. "Let's see." Wang Jilin was mad. He immediately took out his electric baton, pointing it at Gu Ning, and tried to threaten her. However, the minute Wang Jilin did so, Ling Xiaoting got irritated. He kicked him in his stomach without delay, and the electric stick fell onto the ground. "Leader Wang!" All the other policemen in the room instantly stood up, holding their electric batons and aimed them at Ling Xiaoting, like they were going to fight. Yan Shuya had thought that Ling Xiaoting was one of the policemen at the beginning, but to her surprise, Ling Xiaoting was with Gu Ning. She didn't realize that Ling Xiaoting was so handsome until now after she had a closer look at him. "How dare you attack the police?" Wang Jilin shouted at Ling Xiaoting in anger. "So what?" Ling Xiaoting said airily. He would protect Gu Ning even though they were policemen. Wang Jilin was furious, and ordered the other policemen, "Get him now." All of the other policemen immediately attacked Ling Xiaoting, but none of them were able to get near. Within seconds, Ling Xiaoting punched them all down on the floor. This time, the policemen were really sacred. They didn't expect that this man was so excellent at fighting. Wang Jilin immediately pulled out a handgun. He aimed at Ling Xiaoting and threatened, "Freeze! Or I'll shoot you." Seeing the gun, Yan Shuya's face immediately turned pale with fright. Although she knew Kung Fu and wasn't afraid of fighting at all, she didn't want to be killed by a gun. However, Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting stayed calm, but they were both displeased, staring at Wang Jilin coldly. "I think that you better put the gun down. Otherwise, you could be sentenced to jail," Gu Ning said icily. Wang Jilin didn't know that Ling Xiaoting was a military officer. If he knew it and still held a gun aimed at him, he could be shot without doubt. "Gee! Do you think that you can throw me into jail? I have the Wang family's support, and I can throw all of you into prison because you attacked policemen." At this moment, 3 policemen outside ran into hearing room after hearing all the noise. They were all surprised when they found out that 4 of their colleagues were beaten on the ground. Did the man do it alone? They looked to Ling Xiaoting. Wang Jilin ordered without delay, "What are you looking at? Take them to the prison right now." Wang Jilin thought that Ling Xiaoting wouldn't dare to resist this time, but unfortunately, he had the wrong idea. Just as the 3 policemen walked near, Ling Xiaoting beat them all down within seconds again. Wang Jilin was mad and shocked. He immediately thumbed off the safety catch of his pistol, and was ready to shoot Ling Xiaoting. However, before he could do it, his wrist was caught and the gun was removed from his hand. Seeing Gu Ning standing right before his eyes with the gun in her hand, Wang Jilin was terrified and stepped backwards unconsciously. How did you? He was shocked by Gu Ning's agility and sudden movement. How dare you grab my gun? You'll be sentenced to death. Wang Jilin threatened. Really? Can you do that? Gu Ning sneered like he was nobody in her eyes. Wang Jilin didn't believe that Gu Ning dared to shoot him, but he was worried that she would do it accidentally, so he was scared now. I'm a member of the Wang family. If you dare to hurt me, the Wang family won't let you get away with it. That's interesting, because I won't let the Wang family get away with it either. Gu Ning said coldly. Right at this moment, Wang Jilin's phone rang. The caller was the head of the Public Security Bureau in City Tang, Zhang Yuanqing. Wang Jilin immediately answered it. Hi, boss, what can I do for you? The minute Wang Jilin finished his sentence, Zhang Yuanqing roared at the other side. Wang Jilin, did you arrest a male and 2 females today? If you did, let them go right away, or you'll be fired. Wang Jilin trembled in fear and looked to Leng shouting, Gu Ning and Yan Shuya abruptly. Zhang Yuanqing roared into the phone, so everyone in the hearing room all heard his order, and they were all confused as well as amazed. Who are they? And why is the head of the Public Security Bureau calling in person to release them? Gu Ning also gave Leng shouting an inquiry look. She thought that the call had something to do with him. Leng shouting understood what was in Gu Ning's mind, so he nodded as the answer. Bo boss, may I ask the names? Wang Jilin asked while his voice was trembling. Although he was a member of the Wang family, he was just a distant cousin, so he had no position to be arrogant before anyone. Besides, Zhang Yuanqing wasn't only his boss, but also had powerful support. If Zhang Yuanqing was going to fire him, the Wang family wouldn't help him out. Wang Jilin was snobbish, but he knew when to give in. Did you arrest anyone else today? Zhang Yuanqing roared again. He actually had no idea about their names, because his boss didn't tell him the details, but just ordered him to let them leave right now. A fight wasn't a big deal in actual fact, but this time Wang Xinyan, who was the daughter of the Wang family, was involved. And the Wang family was determined to punish Gu Ning. Nobody dared to stop them. However, an important figure from the military region demanded that he should let them go. No, we didn't, Wang Jilin denied in a hurry, but he still reminded Zhang Yuanqing in a low voice. Boss, they annoyed the Wang family. So what? Let them leave right now. Zhang Yuanqing lost his patience. Wang Jilin immediately realized that the 3 people that he had arrested today had to be more influential than the Wang family. Although the Wang family asked him to throw them into jail, he had to follow Zhang Yuanqing's orders now. The Wang family would abandon him when the situation changed anyway. After he hung up the call with Zhang Yuanqing, Wang Jilin's attitude towards Leng shouting completely changed. Well, I'm so sorry about what we've just done and said. Please leave now as you like. Gu Ning didn't pick on Wang Jilin, but left directly. Once they were gone, Wang Jilin called Wang Hongming without delay. Uncle Wang, Wang Jilin's voice still trembled in fear. How is it going? Have you settled it? Wang Hongming asked airily, like it was merely a piece of cake. In his eyes, nobody should or could act against the Wang family in City Tang. I'm so sorry, Uncle Wang. The head of the Public Security Bureau called in person and demanded that we let them go. Wang Jilin apologized. What? Zhang Yuanqing called you in person to let them go? What's their relationship with Zhang Yuanqing? Wang Hongming was mad at once. I have no idea. Wang Jilin wiped the sweat off his forehead. Does Zhang Yuanqing know that they annoyed us? Wang Hongming asked arrogantly, like the Wang family was inviolable. He is aware of it, but he doesn't care. I think that there has to be an influential figure among them, Wang Julin said. Visit en Velben, cm for EU ovals. Hearing that, Wang Hongming was displeased, but his hands were tied too in that case. Well, I'll figure out another way. Wang Hongming was displeased, but he didn't blame Wang Julin. After that, he hung up. Wang Julin was relieved that Wang Hongming didn't blame him. Wang Xinyan was standing right by Wang Hongming's side. Hearing that their plan failed, she refused to give up. Grandpa, please don't let them get away with it so easily. All right, I promise that I won't. Although Wang Hongming sensed that Gu Ning wasn't simple, he still tried to defend the Wang family's dignity. In the beginning, Wang Hongming planned to help Wang Xinyan punish them, but now he was doing it for himself, because he felt humiliated that the Wang family could do nothing about it. After Gu Ning's group left the police station, Gu Ning told Yan Shuya again that she could call her if anything happened, because the Wang family wouldn't give up just like that. Meanwhile, the Wang family had completely irritated Gu Ning this time. Even if they wanted to give up, Gu Ning wouldn't allow them to get away with it. After what had happened today, Yan Shuya and Gu Ning were in the same boat now. Yan Shuya clearly understood that she couldn't stand up against the Wang family, or she wouldn't have tolerated Wang Xinyan's bullying for so long. Luckily, she had Gu Ning's support now, so she was more than willing to keep in touch with her. It was almost 12 p.m. before the problem was solved. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting took a taxi heading back to the hotel, then they drove to the factory building in Leng Xiaoting's rented car. When they got back to the hotel, the receptionists were all surprised to see them coming back safely, because they had heard that the daughter of the Wang family was involved. The Wang family was one of the 4 most influential families in City Tang. If they could punch Miss Wang and still be safe, they had to be more influential than the Wang family. On their way to the factory building, Gu Ning sent a message to K. She wanted him to search for the Wang family's illegal behavior and evidence as soon as possible. As long as she could get the evidence of the Wang family's illegal behavior, she could unseat them easily. Gu Ning didn't believe that the Wang family had done nothing illegal. When Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting arrived at the factory building, everyone was busy working. Gu Ning told them to pack the jade that had been cut out, and they moved it to their store. Afterwards, she asked Xingping to send messages to the representatives of the jewelry companies. They would hold an auction around 2 p.m. at Colorful Jade Provider. It was still an hour and a half away from 2 p.m., so they decided to have lunch first before they went back to the store. Gao Yi and Xiaoya then went to buy takeout for them. Yesterday, all the representatives of the jewelry companies had heard that Colorful Jade Provider would put jade on sale today, so they all sent people to wait at the Colorful Jade Provider office. Once the jade was on sale, they would come without delay. However, during the morning, the door of Colorful Jade Provider office was still tightly closed, which made them feel nervous. Fortunately, each of them received Xingpeng's message before noon. After the meal, Gu Ning's group left for the Street of Stone gambling. However, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting didn't show up with Xingpeng. They arrived earlier than him to pretend that they were just onlookers. Around 12:15 p.m., there were already many people waiting outside of Colorful Jade Provider office. Some were sent by representatives of jewelry companies, some were rich businessmen who wanted to buy jade, some were onlookers, and some were from other jade providers. Especially the 3 largest jade providers in City Tang. They all sent people to help them collect the latest information about Xingpeng's store. In fact, there were at least 8 jade providers in City Tang, but the Zhang family, the Wang family and the Lu family were the most powerful ones. It was universally known that jade was hard to get, so the jade business was highly profitable. Zhao Yifeng came to the store as well, and he greeted Gu Ning the minute he saw her. "Miss Gu, what a coincidence." "Hi, nice to meet you, Mr. Zhao," Gu Ning said. Zhao Yifeng was in a hurry to attend the auction, so he didn't talk with Gu Ning for a long time. Xingpeng and his workers arrived later, followed by the representatives from the jewelry companies. Xingpeng then arranged for them to have a seat. The room was limited in the colorful jade provider office, so only the representatives from the jewelry companies and the rich businessmen had seats. Xingpeng brought out all the chairs and it was barely enough for them to have a seat. Luckily, there were only 20 or so who attended the auction. After all the guests were seated, Xingpeng had his opening speech and mainly introduced colorful jade provider to them. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Colorful Jade Provider is officially established today. Please allow me on behalf of the Colorful Jade Provider to thank you all for coming. I'm the General Manager of Colorful Jade Provider, Xingpeng. He introduced himself as the General Manager, which proved that he wasn't the boss. Then, he began to tell them the methods of sale of Colorful Jade Provider, which were the two methods that Gu Ning had told him. Vist and Velben. CM for new updates. First, they would put jade on sale directly once a week, and the amount was limited to 5 pieces. Xingpeng didn't mention the levels of jade, because no one knew what it was until the jade was cut out. Second, they could supply between 1 to 3 pieces of jade to jewelry businessmen every month. They couldn't promise that they could cut out high-level jade each month, but they promised to provide each of them with at least medium-level jade. However, jewelry businessmen had to sign a contract with Colorful Jade Provider beforehand and acquire their jade monthly for 2 years. Otherwise, they would have to pay liquidated damages. Xingpeng simply introduced the 2 methods of sale and finished his opening speech. Because Gu Ning was running a jade provider, she also bought many raw materials which contained medium-low-level jade. The second method of sale was great news to each of those jewelry businessmen because they were all worried about the steady supply of jade. If Xingpeng was able to provide jade for them every month, they were more than willing to cooperate with him. And although they couldn't get many pieces of jade monthly, it was much better than none. Read the latest stories and novilbin.com. Many jewelry businessmen and representatives of jewelry companies were excited to sign a deal with Xingpeng, but they also had doubts. Manager Zhang, are you sure you can provide jade for us every month? Someone asked. Xingpeng answered, I can't promise there will be jade on sale every week, but I assure you that every client who signs a contract with us will get jade every month. As for the amount, it depends. Xingpeng clearly knew that the raw materials in their factory building were enough for half a year. With Gu Ning's extraordinarily outstanding ability of stone gambling, they weren't worried at all. In addition, there were many other cities in Burma where Gu Ning could buy raw materials. However, to the outside, they should be low-key. We all know how hard it is to cut out jade from raw materials. Manager Zhang, how come you're confident that you can supply jade to us steadily for 2 years? Another person asked. Exactly. Does Colorful Jade Provider have any connection with the Queen of Jade? Someone asked. In fact, many had the same thought. The Queen of Jade was already famous for her extraordinarily outstanding ability of stone gambling. If this Colorful Jade Provider had a close connection with her, it absolutely could supply them with jade for a long term. Although it was the truth, in order to not cause Gu Ning any trouble, Xingpeng could only deny it. Our company has nothing to do with the Queen of Jade. We have our own source of jade, so please don't worry about it. We can sign the contract, and if we fail to provide jade for you, we'll pay you compensation according to the contract. When they heard that, everyone understood that it was a fair business and that Colorful Jade Provider was reliable. Seeing that they didn't have any other questions, Xingpeng added, Colorful Jade Provider is officially being established today, so we'll put 10 pieces of jade up for auction. The minute that Xingpeng announced the news, everyone was thrilled, and the auction was becoming increasingly intense. Among the 10 pieces of jade, there were 3 medium low-level ones, 2 medium-level ones, 2 medium high-level ones, 2 high-level ones and a top-level one. Although they had cut out much more than 10 pieces of jade, Gu Ning only put 10 of them up for auction. In the end, the 10 pieces of jade were sold at the price of 630 million yuan in total. After the auction, colorful jade provider was entirely well known in City Tang. Now Gu Ning already had capital of over 3 billion yuan, and she was able to do what she had planned earlier. Gu Ning pretended she was just an onlooker from the beginning to the end, and didn't expose her relationship with colorful jade provider at all. Ling Xiaoting and Gu Ning didn't walk inside until the auction was over and all the jewelry businessmen were gone. However, when Gu Ning was about to talk with Xingping, a young man suddenly ran into the store and shouted at Xingping, "Dad, why didn't you tell me that you've made so much money? I'm running out of money now, so give me a few million yuan to help me out." "Oh no, you've made 630 million yuan today, and you should give me at least half of that." The young man took it for granted, as if the money should be his. This young man who called Xingping his dad must be Xing Hao. Seeing Xing Hao, Xingping was already angry, so after hearing what he said, he was completely infuriated. Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting were displeased as well. "Xing Hao, get out now. From now on, you have nothing to do with me, and I won't give you a cent." Xingping snapped at Xing Hao in great anger. Xingping had already made up his mind to cut off his connection with Xing Hao. Xingping was kind, but he wasn't dumb. Xing Hao had hurt his feelings too many times and almost ruined his business. He could have died because of him. He would never forgive Xing Hao, let alone give him money. Xingping didn't have the duty to support Xing Hao after all. "What? I'm your only son. Your money is my money. If you don't give it to me, I won't take care of you when you're old." Xing Hao threatened, because he had always believed that Xingping adopted him for the purpose of being looked after in his old age. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Xingping didn't buy his words at all. "I don't need you to do so. Get out right now." Xingping's attitude surprised Xing Hao. He was mad and threatened again, "Give me the money, or you'll regret it. If you don't leave right now, you'll regret it too," Xingping said. Xing Hao glared at Xingping as if he was going to eat him alive. Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting stood still temporarily because they wanted to see whether Xingping would spoil Xing Hao as usual. If Xingping gave in, Gu Ning would abandon him because Xing Hao would ruin her company. "Xing Hao, let me tell you the truth. This jade provider doesn't belong to me, so the money isn't mine either. You've ruined my business and I don't have much money myself. I don't need you to repay me, which is the most I can do. You're not my son any longer, and don't forget the Qing gang is still looking for you. If you dare to hurt me or this store, you probably will die on the street, because my boss has a close relationship with the Qing gang," Xingpeng warned. Although he had already abandoned Xing Hao, he still didn't want him to do something stupid and die for it. This was the last thing that he would do for Xing Hao. Hearing about the Qing gang, Xing Hao immediately lost his energy. Xing Hao had actually already heard of it. He knew that Xingpeng's store had the Qing gang support now, but he thought that Xingpeng would still treat him as his son, give him money and pay his debt, so he came back once he heard that Xingpeng made a large amount of money. Otherwise, he would only have run away further. Xing Hao hesitated for a while, but still left at the end. "Boss, I'm so sorry," Xingpeng immediately apologized to Gu Ning once Xing Hao was gone. "Uncle Xing, it's fine, but I do hope that you can keep on doing so," Gu Ning said. Xing Hao didn't deserve kindness and sympathy. "I understand," Xingping replied. He already made up his mind to be tough in front of Xing Hao. Check new Oval CHers at Novilbin, Com. Then Gu Ning went upstairs to the office on the second floor, followed by Xingpeng. They were going to sign the contract. When Xingpeng read the contract, he was shocked to find out that he could have a 5% share of Colorful Jade Provider. Boss, this 5% shares. It was worth a fortune. Colorful Jade Provider had made over 600 million yuan today, and 5% of it was dozens of million yuan. Moreover, Colorful Jade Provider would continue making more and more money. In that case, 5% shares would be increasingly valuable. Exactly because of that reason, Gu Ning didn't give Xingpeng 20% or 10% shares like she had done to Guangyao and Zhou Xinghong, because a jade business was highly profitable. Xingpeng felt like he was in a dream. It was too good to be true. Uncle Xing, since you're willing to follow my lead, I won't treat you unfairly. Please take it, because you deserve it, and all the senior managers who help me run my companies get the same treatment, Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Xingpeng realized that Gu Ning had more companies than just a jade provider. He was curious, but didn't ask further. Since Gu Ning said that all the senior managers that she hired got the same treatment, Xingpeng relaxed a little, but he still couldn't believe it. Finally, Xingpeng signed the contract and told himself that he had to manage this jade provider well in order to not disappoint Gu Ning. After that, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting left, while Qiaoye and Gao Yi were free to make their own schedule. Gao Yi and Qiaoye were a couple, and they needed private time to be together. Each of the representatives of the jewelry companies went back to their offices and called the headquarters without delay. Without a doubt, their bosses all agreed to sign a contract. It was indeed great news to every jewelry company. And all the jewelry companies couldn't wait to sign the contract with Xingpeng. Wang Hongming also heard of the auction held by Colorful Jade Provider. He was mad, but couldn't figure out why Xingpeng had a steady supply of jade. At the same time, he had the doubt that the Colorful Jade Provider had a close relationship with the Queen of Jade. Even though Xingpeng had denied it, Wang Hongming secretly sent someone to investigate the legal entity of Colorful Jade Provider. It wasn't difficult to find out who the legal entity of a company was. Normally, the legal document was hung up at the reception in shops or companies, but the Colorful Jade Provider office hadn't shown it yet. Therefore, Wang Hongming sent his aide, Lin Jian, to check the information at the Bureau of Industry and Commerce. Lin Jian was in his early 40s and had followed Wang Hongming's lead for over 10 years. He was one of the several people that Wang Hongming trusted the most. Thus Wang Hongming had asked Lin Jian to help him with many dirty deeds during the years. Before long, Lin Jian figured it out. To Wang Hongming's surprise, the legal entity was an 18-year-old girl from another province, and the girl was exactly the one who had beaten his granddaughter and was released by Zhang Yuanqing. In addition, it only took the girl half a day to finish the legal procedures, and the head of the department approved it in person. Wang Hongming was amazed. Who exactly is the girl named Gu Ning? Gu Ning aroused Wang Hongming's curiosity, and he was now convinced that she wasn't simple at all. However, he still had no intention to give in. Even though Gu Ning wasn't an ordinary girl, she had annoyed the Wang family and Wang Hongming wouldn't let her get away with it easily. He didn't believe that she as an outsider was able to beat the most influential family in City Tang. Although the Wang family wasn't the only influential family in City Tang, it was easy for them to deal with a single person. Master, I also got to know another thing, Lin Jian said. What? Wang Hongming asked. Seeing Lin Jian being so serious, Wang Hongming had a premonition. Xingpeng and a girl bought a batch of raw materials from our warehouse. I'm afraid, Lin Jian didn't finish, because his meaning was already apparent. Indeed, Wang Hongming understood him at once. Lin Jian was afraid that the jade that Colorful Jade Provider had sold at auction today was from the Wang family's warehouse. That had to be the last thing that the Wang family wanted to see in this world. Although it was universally known that it was hard to cut out jade from raw materials, it was possible when the buyer was Gu Ning. And they already had cut out 10 pieces of jade in a night. In that case, it was highly possible that Gu Ning had taken all the raw materials with jade inside from their warehouse. If so, Wang Hongming would lose a fortune. No way! Wang Hongming refused to accept the truth. I'm not certain that the jade is from our warehouse, but I can send people to slide into their warehouse and have a look. Lin Jian wasn't very sure, and didn't want to believe it either. Great, bring several men who are good at fighting along with you to have a look. If it's true, steal the raw materials back. Wang Hongming ordered. His expression was malicious. If Gu Ning's raw materials which contained jade were all from his warehouse, he of course wouldn't tolerate it. This time, he hated Gu Ning to death. Sure. Lin Jian answered before he walked out. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting left the street of stone gambling for the antique street. Although they had been there the day before yesterday, they wanted to have a tour again during the day. You came to City Tang for a task. Is it appropriate that you're with me all the time? Gu Ning asked Leng Xiaoting on their way to the antiques town. She knew that Leng Xiaoting had his plane, but she still felt a little guilty. Visit no v3lb/n.cm for new OVL. It's fine. We're going to encircle a drug trafficking gang this time, and we already have undercover agents busy gaining their trust. As long as they can find the den of the drug gang, we'll be informed before we take action to encircle and suppress them, Leng Xiaoting said. Since Leng Xiaoting said so, Gu Ning relaxed. When they arrived at the antique street, there were indeed far more antiques during the day than at night. Compared with the antique street in City G, City Tang's antique street was a lot more active. Gu Ning immediately used her jade eyes to scan the antiques displayed on the stands. While they were walking along the street, Gu Ning noticed a real antique with thick power. It was a blue and white porcelain plate, but it was held in another person's hands. Gu Ning gave the person a glance. To her surprise, it was a familiar face. Hi, Master Tang. Gu Ning walked over. The person was exactly Master Tang. Master Tang heard her voice, and looked over. Girl Gu, what a coincidence! Master Tang was excited to meet Gu Ning. Gu Ning greatly resembled his son, Tang Yunfan, so Master Tang had an inexplicable intimacy towards her. In addition, Gu Ning had saved his life and she had a great character, which all made Master Tang think highly of her. Master Tang's sight then fell on Leng Xiaoting. He thought that the man looked familiar, but couldn't remember where they had met before. This is... Master Tang asked Gu Ning. Oh, this is my boyfriend, Leng Xiaoting, Gu Ning introduced. Nice to meet you, Master Tang, Leng Xiaoting said. Nice to meet you too. Master Tang was a sophisticated, witty man, thus he immediately sensed that Leng Xiaoting wasn't simple. Although Gu Ning was just 18 years old now, she behaved like a mature woman, so Master Tang didn't think that it was inappropriate that the two were boyfriend and girlfriend. Are you shopping for antiques, Master Tang? Gu Ning took a look at the blue and white porcelain plate in his hands. It was a valuable one, and Gu Ning didn't know whether Master Tang was just lucky or if he was an expert. Yes, I felt bored so I came here to have a look. I think this plate looks good, Master Tang smiled, but then he approached closer to Gu Ning's ears and said, I actually don't think that there are real antiques here. It's getting a bit boring too. Saying that, Master Tang was about to put the plate down. Gu Ning immediately stopped him. Since you think it looks good, why don't you buy it? It's a great decoration either way. Gu Ning also gave Master Tang a knowing eye to persuade him to buy it. Master Tang was surprised. He understood that Gu Ning wouldn't make him buy this plate for no reason. Is this plate a real one? Does she know antiques? Master Tang thought to himself. Nevertheless, how can she be so sure? Seeing that Master Tang was confused, Gu Ning gave him an affirmative nod again. Master Tang was surprised and curious, but it wasn't the right time to ask the question. Since Gu Ning told him to buy it, he would do so. It was cheap after all. Accordingly, Master Tang told his bodyguard, Tang Wen, to pay the money. Girl Gu, are you free now? Why don't we have a cup of tea together? Master Tang invited. Sure. Gu Ning understood why Master Tang invited them, so she didn't reject. After that, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting followed Master Tang, walking into a private room of a nearby tea house. The minute that they were in the private room, Master Tang asked Gu Ning, Girl Gu, why are you so sure that this plate is real? My instinct, Gu Ning replied. What? Your instinct? Master Tang was slightly displeased. Apparently, he wasn't satisfied with the answer. My instinct is always right. If you don't believe it, you can turn to an expert and have it checked, Gu Ning said calmly. No matter what, Master Tang was going to have it appraised. They then started to enjoy the tea while chatting. Leng Xiaoting stayed silent, but didn't feel bored or uncomfortable at all. As long as he was with Gu Ning, he felt happy enough even if he just sat by her side. Master Tang tried to talk with Leng Xiaoting at the beginning, but he soon realized that Leng Xiaoting was not a talkative person. Although Master Tang was from an influential family, he wasn't arrogant and stayed low profile. He was always serious and strict, so many people, including his own family, in City B were in awe of him. However, when he faced Gu Ning, he was very kind, maybe because she was his lifesaver, or maybe because she was adorable, or even maybe because she resembled his son who he loved and cherished the most. Gu Ning explained later, Master Tang, please don't mind him. He never loves talking. Haha, it's fine. Master Tang didn't mind at all. However, you don't need to call me Master Tang all the time. I don't feel close to you if you call me that. If you don't mind, you can call me Grandpa Tang. To be honest with you, you closely resemble my second son, so I've always had an inexplicable intimacy towards you, but... Speaking of it, Master Tang sighed heavily and looked sad. All of a sudden, Gu Ning had a strange feeling. I closely resemble Master Tang's second son? Master Tang has an inexplicable intimacy towards me? Is there any connection? To be specific, Gu Ning could be Tang Yunfan's daughter. Although there were many people who resembled each other in this world, Gu Ning didn't want to ignore the possibility that she might have a close connection with the Tang family. Leng Xiaoting was sensitive and immediately sensed Gu Ning's small emotional changes. In fact, he had the same thought. Does Gu Ning really have a relationship with the Tang family? But what? Gu Ning couldn't help asking. Although she knew that it was a little impolite, she was eager to find out what he wanted to say. He's been occupied by his career throughout his lifetime. He never got married or had a kid. Otherwise, no one would doubt that you're his daughter, Master Tang said. Occupied by his career and never got married or had a kid. Gu Ning had mixed emotions now. She wasn't sure whether her guess could be correct. According to Gu Man's account, Gu Ning's biological father had disappeared in an accident, which meant that he could be dead already, but what if he had survived? If he had survived, why didn't he come back for Gu Man? It had been 18 years. However, Gu Man also told her that when they had met each other, the man had completely lost his memory. In that case, it was possible that the man had regained his memory after he had survived but had forgotten the memory of when he had been with Gu Man. It sounded insane, but was indeed possible. Gu Ning thought that maybe Tang Yunfan didn't marry or have children not only because of his career, but also because he had already found but lost his love and couldn't accept anyone else. Those were just Gu Ning's guesses, but no matter what, she made up her mind to investigate it. She didn't want Gu Man to wait for 18 years in vain. Well, I want to meet this uncle after what Grandpa Tang has told me. I'm curious how closely we resemble each other. Actually, I was born in a one-parent family and my mother brought me up with great effort. I never knew what my father looked like, Gu Ning said and felt sad. Speaking of family, Lin Xiaoting was slightly unhappy too. He had met both of his parents, but had lost them when he had only been 10 years old. And now he could only look at the photos of his parents. Hearing what Gu Ning said, Master Tang felt a deep sympathy for her. He hadn't known that Gu Ning was born in a poor family, and unconsciously wanted to take care of her. All of a sudden, an idea dawned on Master Tang. Why don't you treat my second son as your foster father? I've always wanted to have a granddaughter like you. Master Tang looked at Gu Ning with anticipation. He was being serious, and wasn't joking. Master Tang's bodyguards, Tang Wen and Tang Wu, understood Master Tang's affection towards Gu Ning, but to their surprise, Master Tang was willing to foster Gu Ning. In the past, they would probably have thought that it totally changed Gu Ning's fate, because she suddenly became a super rich heir from being a dirt poor girl. However, after Gu Ning had saved their master's life, they believed that this girl wasn't simple, and that it wasn't a bad thing to have a close relationship with her. All the rich people valued their health above money. Gu Ning understood that Master Tang wasn't just saying it, but she didn't agree immediately. Grandpa Tang, I think that it's a big deal and that we should consider your second son's opinion. And she should consider it as well. If she closely resembled another man, but the man wasn't her biological father, she was reluctant to have a closer relationship with him. She cared about Gu Man's feelings. If Gu Man saw a man who greatly resembled her love, but they weren't the same person, she would be hurt. Gu Man would inevitably meet the Tang family if Gu Ning accepted Tang Yunfan to be her foster father. On the contrary, if Tang Yunfan was Gu Ning's biological father, Gu Ning was more than willing to let them meet each other again. As long as they still loved each other, Gu Ning was happy to see her family reunite. Gu Ning didn't want Gu Man to be alone for the rest of her life. She was still young and she should live her own happy life. In addition, Gu Ning was leaving for the capital soon, and she would be apart from Gu Man. If Gu Man had a reliable man to keep her company for the rest of her lifetime, Gu Ning would of course agree. Well, Master Tang felt that it wouldn't be easy. He understood his son's personality so well and knew that Tang Yunfan would probably disagree, but if he insisted on doing it without Tang Yunfan's approval, Gu Ning would be embarrassed. Master Tang was a little disappointed. Seeing that, Gu Ning smiled and comforted him. If you really want to have a granddaughter like me, please take me as your granddaughter, and I'll regard you as my grandpa too. Hearing that, Master Tang's eyes lit up at once. Ha ha. I think that's a good idea. Are you studying in a high school or a university now? Master Tang asked Gu Ning. I'm a senior in high school, and I'm going to attend the National College Entrance Exam in half a year, Gu Ning replied. Which university do you want to attend? How about City B? I can take care of you if you study in City B, Master Tang said. Since he already took Gu Ning as his granddaughter, he naturally treated her like his own granddaughter. She's going to the capital, and I'll look after her. This time, before Gu Ning could answer Master Tang's question, Lin Xiaoting opened his mouth first. He seized Gu Ning's hand, as if she was leaving him for City B. Although Gu Ning had no intention to study in City B, Lin Xiaoting was afraid that she would change her mind because of Master Tang. Gu Ning understood that Lin Xiaoting didn't want to lose her, so she held his hand in hers to show her determination. Thanks, Grandpa Tang, I already made the decision to go to the capital, Gu Ning said. Find you chapters on nv/lbi.com. Fine, but if you're free, do come to City B and have fun. I'll pay the bill, Master Tang added. Sure, I will, Gu Ning answered. After they chatted for a while longer, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting said goodbye to Master Tang. Seeing Gu Ning leaving, Master Tang suddenly felt lonely for no reason. When they walked out of the tea house, Leng Xiaoting asked, "Do you want to investigate it?" Gu Ning understood what Leng Xiaoting was talking about. "I'll handle it myself, but don't worry, no matter what the result is, I'm determined to go to the capital." Leng Xiaoting was slightly disappointed that Gu Ning declined his help, but he didn't insist. Gu Ning was determined to go to the capital after all, and he didn't need to worry that they couldn't be together in the future. After that, they continued to have a tour around the antique street. In the end, Gu Ning accidentally picked up 2 real antiques. One was worth 1,000,000 yuan, while the other was worth around 8,000,000 yuan. When they finished the tour along the antique street, it was already 5 p.m., so they went back to the hotel. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting stopped the car in the parking lot, then went to have dinner at a nearby restaurant. During the meal, Gu Ning received Master Tang's call. He thanked her for advising him to buy the blue and white porcelain plate, which turned out to be a real one. Master Tang also invited Gu Ning to have a meal together, but Gu Ning declined because she was in the middle of her dinner. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting went back to their presidential suite after they finished dinner. However, the minute that they walked into the room, Gu Ning quickly noticed that there was something wrong in the room. She found a red spot on the TV. It must be a pinhole camera. Normally, people wouldn't find it with their eyes, so Leng Xiaoting didn't realize that there was anything wrong, but Gu Ning had jade eyes which helped her notice the pinhole camera. She immediately turned to Leng Xiaoting and said, "Oh, I want to eat dragon fruit. Would you please buy some for me?" Then she said in an extremely low voice, "There is a camera inside." Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting was alert. "You can leave first," Gu Ning said in an extremely low voice again. "All right, just dragon fruit?" Leng Xiaoting replied in concert with Gu Ning. "And kiwi please," Gu Ning replied, but said quietly, "We need to change hotels." "No problem." After that, Leng Xiaoting turned around and left. Gu Ning closed the door and turned on the lamp. She walked around the room as usual, but she was actually checking whether there were more cameras hidden elsewhere. Except for the one attached to the TV in the living room, there was another hidden at the bedside in the master bedroom. Apart from the hidden cameras, Gu Ning also discovered a small feather box under the bed. There were bags of white powder in it. Gu Ning was displeased. Apparently, this was a trap. She tried to put the box into her telepathic eye space without reaching underneath the bed, because there were cameras recording everything, and she didn't want to expose herself. Luckily, Gu Ning had enough power to do so. In that case, they wouldn't be trapped. In case any accidents happened, Gu Ning scanned the whole suite once more before she went to pack up. All of a sudden, someone knocked on the door. Gu Ning used her jade eyes and saw that there were 7 policemen outside. She was slightly mad. These policemen indeed couldn't wait. Gu Ning thought to herself. However, the box of drugs was already put away in her telepathic eye space, so she wasn't worried that they would find anything. New chapters will be fully updated at novl/bin.com. What happened? Gu Ning opened the door and asked, like she knew nothing at all. "We received a report that you secretly bought drugs and brought them back to this hotel. We need to conduct a search." The leading policeman showed Gu Ning his search warrant and said as if he was just doing his job. "Oh! Someone reported me? Who, when and where? Gu Ning asked calmly. For the witness's safety, we have the right to keep it a secret. We have a search warrant. If you dare to resist, we can directly arrest you, the policeman said. Fine, come in please. Gu Ning didn't stop them. The other policemen didn't know, but the leading policeman understood that Gu Ning had no idea that there was a box of drugs hidden under her bed, so he was very confident to search her suite. Once they found the box of drugs, Gu Ning would have to admit. Gu Ning let them walk inside, but also used her jade eyes to scan them from head to toe in order to see whether they carried bags of drugs with them. However, they were too confident, or the person behind them was too confident, to prepare other bags of drugs to trap Gu Ning in case they couldn't find the box of drugs in her suite. Move now, the leading policeman ordered, and the other 6 policemen immediately conducted the search around the suite. They didn't directly search the bed in the master bedroom, instead they searched everywhere in the room. Gu Ning could tell that only the leading policeman knew where the drugs were hidden. After they had searched everywhere in the suite, including Gu Ning's suitcase, they found nothing illegal. Captain, we've searched everywhere, but found nothing. Captain, I didn't find any illegal drugs either. How's it possible? Did you search the space under the bed? The leading policeman blurted it out unconsciously. We did, a policeman answered. The leading policeman couldn't believe it, because his boss clearly told him that the box of drugs was under the bed. He went to check himself, but failed to find it. So, you've conducted your search, and found nothing illegal. Can you leave now? Gu Ning said. No, just because we can't find it out doesn't mean that you don't have drugs. Tell us, where did you hide your drugs? The leading policeman obviously didn't want to give up. Well, Gu Ning sneered. I'm curious, why are you so confident that I have drugs with me? I've let you search the suite already. If you don't have proof, you have no reason to accuse me. Is there someone behind you who wants to trap me? Gu Ning's attitude turned tough, and fixed her eyes on him. The leading policeman panicked a little. He wanted to retort, but someone ordered him to retreat in his earphones. Gu Ning heard it too, and drew her lips into a cold smile. The leading policeman then left with his colleagues, and Gu Ning didn't stop them. It was meaningless trying to deal with them now. Once Kay handed evidences of the Wang family's illegal behavior to Gu Ning, she could easily unseat the Wang family. The moment that the policemen were gone, Gu Ning left the hotel too. Lin Jian, instead, was struck dumb in front of the computer which showed the video captured by the hidden cameras. He couldn't figure out why his scheme had failed. He had watched the box of drugs put under the bed in the master bedroom with his own eyes from the hidden cameras. And he had been waiting in front of the computer the entire time. It was impossible that Gu Ning had the chance to remove the box of drugs. What the hell is going on? Lin Jian was anxious, and immediately reported it to Wang Hongming. Wang Hongming was also shocked, and couldn't believe that they had failed, but they had to accept the truth and hope that their people in Colorful Jade Provider's factory could succeed. Ling Shaoting ordered a presidential suite in a nearby 5-star hotel. He carefully searched the whole suite, and didn't leave until he found no hidden cameras or bugs inside. He called Gu Ning, but Gu Ning didn't tell him many details, because she didn't know how to explain how the drugs disappeared all of a sudden. Around 10 p.m., Gu Ning received Kay's call. He already sent the evidence that he found against the Wang family to her email box. Boss, are you a spy sent by our nation? Why are your enemies all criminals? Kay asked and joked, because the people that Gu Ning asked him to investigate every time were so special. I'm not, but I'm too outstanding and some people are jealous of me, Gu Ning said resignedly. Although she was kidding too, it was the truth. Well, it seems that it is not an easy task to work for you. I wish I could travel around. Kay complained. You can't regret, unless you want your legs to be the same as before, Gu Ning said. Kay immediately realized that he shouldn't have said that. No, of course not. Bye. After that, Kay hung up at once. Gu Ning couldn't help laughing. She then sent a message to Kay and told him to investigate the second son of the Tang family in City B. She wanted to find out what he was doing 18 years ago. Ling Xiaoting was in the shower, so he didn't know that Kay was talking with Gu Ning. A while later, he walked out of the bathroom and pressed against Gu Ning without delay. They started kissing and touching each other, and Gu Ning totally forgot to check the email sent by Kay. However, while they were both sexually excited, Gu Ning's phone rang and interrupted them. Ling Xiaoting was displeased, but didn't stop Gu Ning from answering the phone. It must be something important if someone called her at night. It was Qiao Ye. She told Gu Ning that some people had just broken into the factory of Colorful Jade Provider, but they got control of them the moment that they got inside. It turned out that the Wang family sent them. Qiao Ye asked Gu Ning how to deal with it. Hearing that, Gu Ning was mad. It seemed like the Wang family wouldn't give up until they succeeded. Take a video of their account, then call the police, Gu Ning said. Gu Ning understood that the police wouldn't punish them when faced with the Wang family's influence, but Gu Ning also had no intention to use them against the Wang family. She merely wanted to cause a sensation. If the police ignore the case, you can post it on the internet, Gu Ning added. Qiao Ye followed Gu Ning's order. She called the police first, but the police indeed ignored her. Thus Qiao Ye and Gao Yi posted it on the internet afterwards. The news immediately went viral, because the Wang family was notorious for its rude and arrogant behavior. Many people disliked them and seized every chance to criticize them. The police didn't expect that it would go viral. In order to stop it from spreading further, they immediately sent policemen to handle it. The police also called Wang Hongming because the Wang family was involved in this case. Wang Hongming was annoyed after he found out that his plan B had failed as well. To his surprise, there were many people who were excellent at fighting guarding Colorful Jade Provider's factory. Wang Hongming of course refused to admit that the Wang family was involved. Although the people confessed that the Wang family sent them to damage the factory, Wang Hongming denied it, so they were sentenced as thieves in the end. Gu Ning didn't show any disappointment, because she already had her plan. The next day around 9 o'clock, Wang Hongming said to Lin Jian, "Spread the news that the boss of Colorful Jade Provider is the so-called Queen of Jade, and tell other raw material providers not to sell raw materials to them." Wang Hongming did that not because he knew the relationship between Colorful Jade Provider and the Queen of Jade, but because he wanted to cut off the raw material supply of Colorful Jade Provider. "Sure," Lin Jian replied. Follow US stories at nvl/by/n.com. However, right at this moment, Wang Hongming received a call. After answering the call, Wang Hongming was stunned. Just then in City Tang, all the computers in the internet cafes were hacked. There were lines of words shown on the screens. Wang Yanfeng, the son of Wang Bakong, who is the vice mayor of City Tang, is involved in the crime of raping teenage girls many times. On May 12 last year, Wang Yafeng raped and killed his teacher's 16-year-old daughter because he had been dissatisfied with his teacher's education. Wang Bakong, as the vice mayor, had secretly arranged another person to replace his son, and the man had been sentenced to death. There was also a video attached to the lines. In the video, Wang Yafeng looked terrified, squatting and trembling in a corner. He confessed everything he had done illegally. In his confession, he had conducted rape at least 10 times in the past 3 years, and all the victims were common girls who didn't have a powerful family background as support. Especially on May 12 last year, when Wang Yafeng was a senior in a high school, his teacher had criticized him because he had been involved in a fight. Wang Yafeng then raped and killed his teacher's 16-year-old daughter along with one of his classmates. Afterwards, under the arrangement of Wang Bakong, who was the vice mayor of City Tang, Wang Yafeng's classmate had been sentenced to death, but Wang Yafeng had successfully gotten away with it. In Wang Yafeng's phone, there were pictures and videos of his rapes. He used the pictures and videos to threaten those victims to stay quiet. Those victims weren't able to act against the influential Wang family, so they had to shut their mouths. The second the scandal was exposed, it caused a great sensation across City Tang. People were all irritated. Many called the Public Security Bureau and demanded that they investigate the case. The Wang family's reputation was completely ruined this time. What they had done was totally unacceptable. Meanwhile, each of the officials in City Tang also received a message to which the same video was attached. Their anger was ignited too, and all went to Wang Bakong's office to criticize him. Zhang Yuanqing, who was the head of the Public Security Bureau, went to arrest Wang Bakong in person. As for Wang Yafeng, he had already been sent to the Public Security Bureau beforehand and was now under the control of the police. In fact, only Wang Hongming and Wang Bakong knew of Wang Yafeng's scandal in the Wang family, but it was beyond their imagination that the scandal was exposed now. And to their astonishment, Wang Yafeng had committed many more crimes than they had known. They had always thought that Wang Yafeng had done it out of impulse, but what they didn't know was that Wang Yafeng actually loved doing it. Although the Wang family was influential in City Tang, they couldn't act against the laws all the time. Wang Yafeng had now admitted it himself, so Wang Bakong had no way to refute it. However, who had forced Wang Yafeng to admit his crimes in that way was still a puzzle. Not only was Wang Hongming and Wang Bakong curious, but the public also wanted to know. At the same time, the Wang family was in a total mess. "Dad, please rescue Bakong and Yafeng." Wang Bakong's wife, Li Mingjie, cried, begging Wang Hongming. "How? Yafeng already confessed. How am I supposed to rescue him?" Wang Hongming snapped. He was absolutely eager to rescue his own son and grandson, but his hands were tied in such a terrible situation. The Wang family was indeed powerful and influential in City Tang, but it didn't mean that they could act against the laws and get away with it all the time. If Wang Yafeng hadn't admitted it yet, it would still be possible to rescue him, but now they had no chance. Wang Hongming had spat out blood many times since yesterday, and he was weak now. It wasn't easy for him to stand today. After these days of chaos, Wang Hongming's hair was quickly turning gray. In fact, Wang Bakong had a more important figure to support him in politics, but the figure wouldn't answer his call after the scandal was exposed, which meant that Wang Bakong had already been abandoned by the figure. In this sensitive situation, nobody was willing to be involved in the Wang family's mess. The Wang family was strongly being criticized at the moment. "Then what should we do?" Li Mingjie asked in despair, falling down on the ground. She understood the gravity of the situation, but she couldn't watch her husband and her son sentenced to jail or even death. Even so, she had no idea what to do next. "Dad, can't we figure out a way?" Wang Hongming's eldest son, Wang Xinyan's father, Wang Bowen, asked. Wang Hongming had 3 sons and a daughter in all. His eldest son, Wang Bowen, was involved in business, his second son, Wang Bakong, worked in politics, and his youngest son, Wang Buyuan, was also a businessman who managed their family business along with Wang Bowen. "What can I do given what has happened? You all need to stay away from this scandal. Nobody can ask or be involved in it. If anyone dares to ruin the Wang family by getting involved in it, go away now." Wang Hongming warned seriously. Although it seemed cold-blooded, he had to make the choice between Wang Bakong, Wang Yafeng, and the whole Wang family. "Dad." Li Mingjie was reluctant to accept it. "Shut your mouth. If you don't want to accept it, go and rescue them yourself." Wang Hongming lost his patience. Li Mingjie then remained silent. After that, Wang Bowen helped Wang Hongming walk back to his bedroom. Although Wang Hongming could do nothing for now, he wouldn't give up like that. Wang Bakong and Wang Yafeng were his biological son and grandson after all. He would give it a try no matter what would happen. Moreover, he also made up his mind to find out who had exposed the scandal. Wang Hongming set himself to get revenge. Because of the scandal, Wang Hongming forgot to spread the news that the colorful jade provider had a relationship with the Queen of Jade. At that moment, Gu Ning was having breakfast with Leng Xiaoting in the dining hall of the hotel. All of a sudden, a woman at the next table said loudly in surprise, "Jesus! The vice mayor's son has conducted rape at least 10 times. A teacher's daughter who was raped and killed a year ago was one of the victims." Wang Bakong also made another boy a scapegoat to keep his own son safe. "It's so cruel." The woman's words astonished everyone in the dining hall. The vice mayor? Isn't he a member of the Wang family? His son has committed over 10 rape crimes and killed a girl? If it was true, the Wang family indeed were animals. Gu Ning thought to herself. Afterwards, she heard the sound from the video in which Wang Yafeng confessed everything that he had done illegally. The Wang family are complete animals. Gu Ning was mad. Suddenly, Gu Ning thought of the email sent by K. She instantly took out her phone and clicked open her email box. A document attached to the email recorded the fact that Wang Yafeng had committed rape crimes at least 10 times, but that he had never been punished. Gu Ning was curious about who had exposed this case before her. Abruptly, Gu Ning looked to Leng Xiaoting with doubt. She thought that Leng Xiaoting might have done it, but wasn't sure. "It was me," Leng Xiaoting admitted directly. Gu Ning opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. She was deeply touched that the man would stand up for her against the Wang family without hesitation. "It's just the beginning," Leng Xiaoting said coldly. The Wang family dared to hurt Gu Ning, and he would let them pay for it. Leng Xiaoting was determined to unseat the Wang family. "Don't worry. I already have evidence of the Wang family's illegal behavior. I can unseat the Wang family today," Gu Ning said, then let Leng Xiaoting read the email sent by K. Reading the list of evidence, Leng Xiaoting was extremely displeased. He knew clearly that all of the authorities had done something illegal. Normally he would ignore them if he didn't know any details, but the Wang family was different. They had tried to hurt Gu Ning in vain several times, and Leng Xiaoting wouldn't let them get away with it easily. EAD new chapters on no/v/e/ln.com. Before long, Gu Ning received Yan Shuya's call. She asked Gu Ning with excitement, "Gu Ning, was it you who have did it?" Yan Shuya was more than thrilled when she heard the news. Although she didn't hate the Wang family, she had a long-standing grudge against Wang Xinyan. It was just a personal grudge, but what the Wang family had done was completely unacceptable. Yan Shuya knew that the Wang family had many enemies, but at this time, the first person who came into her mind was Gu Ning. "Yes," Gu Ning admitted, but didn't explain further. Having Gu Ning's affirmative answer, Yan Shuya didn't feel like what she had done wasn't right. Instead, she admired even more Gu Ning now. Even though there was someone else of great power that supported her, Gu Ning alone almost unseated the Wang family. Before the Wang family was able to find out who had exposed the scandal, more evidence of their illegal behavior was exposed. It caused another sensation in City Tang. Wang Bowen was suspected of tax evasion for at least hundreds of millions of yuan, while Wang Buiyuan was the head of the biggest gang in City Tang, and he had been involved in many cases of drug trade as well as murder. It was universally known that the Wang family had many dirty secrets, but the truth was still shocking. Within a short time, many of the Wang family were caught. In the end, only Wang Hongming and the women were left safe in the house. It happened too fast for the Wang family to prepare, thus none of them had a chance to run away. The Wang family also tried to deny the evidence in vain. Wang Hongming was an aging old man, whose body wasn't in good condition. And this time, he was totally sick with anger. Why? Why are all these dirty secrets being exposed at this time? Who is behind this? Visit Velben. CM for EU ovals. Is it Wang Buikang's enemy in politics or Gu Ning? Wang Hongming thought to himself. If it was Gu Ning, he had to admit now that he was truly regretful for having annoyed her, but it was too late to regret. Wang Hongming had been sophisticated and shrewd throughout his lifetime, but now his whole family was ruined because of his revenge. He couldn't bear the result and passed away after a short time. However, it happened after the dust settled. Anyway, the Wang family's reputation was completely destroyed now. Nobody would forgive or forget what they had done. Meanwhile, people were also curious about the identity of the person who had the power to unseat the Wang family. The Wang family was unseated, which was exciting, but it happened too fast and made people feel as if it was unreal. The next day, Wang Buikang's alliances in politics were all punished or sentenced to jail. However, this time Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning weren't involved. Wang Buikang's political rival caused it. Wang Buikang's political rival had always wanted to unseat him, but didn't have solid evidence. Besides, the Wang family was one of the most influential families in City Tang, but now someone directly threw Wang Buikang into prison and his political rival couldn't wait any longer. Gu Ning didn't care about the Wang family's fate in the future, because they were already punished for what they had done. On their way back to the hotel, Leng Xiaoting suddenly gave Gu Ning a gift. Gu Ning was thrilled and almost jumped up with excitement when she saw it. It was the document of the Wang family's raw material exploitation right. In that case, Gu Ning replaced the Wang family and became one of the 3 largest raw material suppliers in City Tang, which was a big surprise to Gu Ning. In fact, Gu Ning had also planned to exploit raw materials in City Tang. And she had bought such a huge factory building and established a jade provider for the same purpose. With her jade eyes, it was super easy for her to find a mountain or mine of jade. More importantly, the Wang family already lost its power and position in City Tang. It would be even easier for Gu Ning if she replaced the Wang family and maintained the connection with the Wang family's clients. Unexpectedly, Leng Xiaoting had the same idea and already got the document for her, which touched her deeply. How much did you have to pay for it? Gu Ning asked. She understood that it had to have been expensive, and she was reluctant to accept gifts from him without giving him anything. Actually, money was nothing in Leng Xiaoting's eyes, but it didn't mean that Gu Ning would take it for granted. It's just a gift. Leng Xiaoting understood what was on Gu Ning's mind, but he wasn't willing to talk about money with her. He valued their close relationship above money. Nevertheless, Gu Ning felt a little guilt and uneasy. Well, if you really want to pay me back, you can. Leng Xiaoting suddenly looked at Gu Ning in a different way. Gu Ning immediately realized what he wanted. Before she could escape, Leng Xiaoting pressed her against him. Gu Ning complained, I think you're a little horny recently. What will happen if I'm not by your side? Will he turn to another woman? Gu Ning thought to herself. Although she believed that Leng Xiaoting wouldn't do that, she wasn't him, nor was she a man. Therefore, even though Leng Xiaoting loved her very much, she wasn't confident that he would be loyal to her all the time. However, if he really cheated on her, she would leave him without hesitation. Gu Ning wasn't a girl who relied on a man to live her life. Leng Xiaoting was nervous and immediately clasped Gu Ning in his arms. Ning Ning, please don't worry. I promise that only you turn me on like this. Seeing Leng Xiaoting being so serious, Gu Ning felt slightly embarrassed and changed the topic at once. I'm hungry. Really? Ling Xiaoting squinted and wore an evil smile. Gu Ning flushed. The man was totally different now. I want to eat. Gu Ning pretended to be mad, but she just seemed adorable in Ling Xiaoting's eyes. In case Ling Xiaoting couldn't control himself again, Gu Ning immediately pushed him away. Ling Xiaoting didn't expect that Gu Ning would push him away all of a sudden, so he failed to catch her. Gu Ning's beautiful, sexy body appeared in his sight, which turned him on again, but right at this moment, Ling Xiaoting's phone rang and interrupted him. He still had to fulfill his task and couldn't ignore it. The call was from Su Jinchen. He told Ling Xiaoting that they had already gotten the drug dealer's address. It was time for them to take action, thus Ling Xiaoting had to be apart from Gu Ning temporarily. Although Gu Ning knew that Ling Xiaoting was an outstanding military officer, she still reminded him to be careful. Gu Ning really wanted to help him if it wasn't for his team's special identity. This night, Gu Ning slept alone and somehow felt as if she was not used to it. Precisely because she was free now, she suddenly thought of the WeChat group. There were thousands of messages in the chat history, and many of them mentioned her. Gu Ning called Gu Man on alternate days, but she totally forgot their WeChat group, and now felt a little guilty. The moment that Gu Ning appeared, an animated discussion started. Gu Ning, how are you doing recently? How ran, wow. Boss, we thought you were lost. We even wanted to call the police. Moo Ku, exactly. Where have you been? Chu Pei Han, I think boss is busy dating. Qin Zixuan, I agree. Ani, Zhang Tianping and Yu Mixi were absent, so Gu Ning chatted with Chu Pei Han and the others for a while longer before she went to bed. The next day around 8:30 a.m., Gu Ning left for the Street of Stone gambling. She told Xingping that she had already gotten the raw material exploitation right document. Xingping was shocked by his boss's efficiency and network in the government. Gu Ning didn't explain further. She intentionally impressed Xingping so that he would be loyal to her and be willing to follow her lead. Because although Gu Ning trusted Xingping, it was necessary to make him scared of her to some extent. Gu Ning understood that it would impress him more if she told him that she had unseated the Wang family, but she had no intention to tell him that. Up.dfrm no/v/e/lb I n.co/m. Afterwards, they planned to hold a press conference to spread the news abroad. The news of the Wang family and the colorful jade provider was extremely popular recently, so many reporters came to Xingping's store once he called them. Xingping, of course, would host the press conference. When the colorful jade provider took over and absorbed the Wang family's raw material supplier, people were all shocked. The Wang family was unseated and its properties naturally would be dealt with. Its raw material exploitation right especially aroused the interest of countless businessmen. However, before the others could react, the boss of colorful jade provider had already gotten it, which astonished all of them. In other words, the boss of colorful jade provider had to be an important figure with a strong network. Therefore, many people were in awe of its boss. Colorful jade provider had been established for just a few days, but it was already able to make long-term deals with many famous jewelry businessmen. And now it even got the Wang family's raw material exploitation right before anyone else. Its boss must be a person of great power. In fact, it wasn't difficult for those who had the ability to find out who the boss of colorful jade provider was, but in ordinary people's eyes, its boss was mysterious. Many who went to investigate the boss of colorful jade provider were just curious. However, when they found out that its boss was just an 18-year-old girl, they were all stunned. Although they didn't believe that a teenage girl was able to run the company alone, they couldn't ignore her ability and the powerful support behind her. Thus, no one dared to spread the news that the boss of colorful jade provider was Gu Ning in case they annoyed her. However, no one was more shocked than Zhang Deqing because he had met Gu Ning before, and he believed that Gu Ning had the ability to run the company. Zhang Deqing suddenly thought of a piece of news that he had read on the internet before the Wang family's scandal was exposed. It was said that the Wang family had sent people to break into colorful jade provider's warehouse at night. An idea dawned on Zhang Deqing at this time. He sensed that the Wang family had a grudge against Gu Ning and that its decline had something to do with Gu Ning too. Zhang Deqing was amazed by his own guess. If Gu Ning was really involved in the Wang family's mess, she had to be much more powerful than he could ever know. No matter what, Zhang Deqing would always believe that Gu Ning was an able young girl and wanted to maintain a good relationship with her. In that case, even though he now knew that Gu Ning was the boss of both colorful jade provider and colorful raw material provider, he didn't point it out. In the following days, Gu Ning told Xingping to arrange for the workers who had worked for the Wang family's company to exploit raw materials as soon as possible. Gu Ning had no intention to take the rest of the raw materials in the Wang family's warehouse, because she had already gotten all the raw materials with high-quality jade inside earlier. Gu Ning also didn't fire the workers who had worked for the Wang family, because they were merely employees hired by the Wang family. None of them thought that it was a bad thing that their boss changed. The Wang family's illegal behavior annoyed everyone in City Tang and nobody had sympathy for them. Instead, the workers felt lucky to stay, because they could keep their jobs. Thus they thanked and respected Xingpeng and his boss. Later, Gu Ning and Xingpeng went to the Jade Mountains and mines together with a chauffeur. Although Xingpeng could drive himself, he was now the general manager of both colorful jade provider and colorful raw material provider, so it was necessary that he had a personal driver. The Jade Mountains and mines were 20 kilometers away from City Tang. On their way, Gu Ning noticed that there were several mountains which had already been exploited. The distance of Gu Ning's jade eyes was limited, so she wasn't able to see whether there was jade in the surrounding mountains. She had to wait until they arrived. They drove on mountain roads, so it took them around half an hour to get to their destination. From afar, Gu Ning heard a knocking noise. When they drew near, a large tin house appeared in their sight. It was where the workers stayed. Outside of the tin house, 2 trucks which were used to deliver raw materials were stopped. Wang Jinmao was 34 years old. He was the supervisor and was in charge of the exploitation of raw materials. And although his family name was Wang, he had no relationship with the Wang family. Wang Jinmao had been informed before Xingping came here, so he was already waiting at the entrance. Seeing the car driving over, Wang Jinmao understood that Xingping was coming. The car stopped at the site, the driver got out first and opened the door for Xingpeng while Gu Ning climbed out on her own. She came here as Xingpeng's assistant, so she couldn't behave like a boss. "Nice to meet you, Manager Zheng." Wang Jinmao greeted him with great respect. "Nice to meet you too, Supervisor Wang," Xingpeng replied. "Please follow me this way, Manager Zheng." Wang Jinmao immediately guided the way ahead of Xingpeng's group. When they walked past the tin house, Wang Jinmao took out several helmets, handing it to them. They put the helmet on before walking into the site. The Jade Mountain was just a couple of minutes of walking away from the tin house. Gu Ning used her jade eyes when she finally stood before the Jade Mountain. She saw many raw materials which contained jade on the Jade Mountain, but didn't take them. She was satisfied that the Jade Mountain before her eyes was highly valuable. Gu Ning took a look at the nearby mountains and failed to find another Jade Mountain among them. LL News Tirais at N0V/LBI/.cm. Xingpeng and Gu Ning had a tour around the site before they went back. On their way back, Gu Ning received K's message. He had already sent an email about the Tang family to her email box. Gu Ning only told him to investigate the Tang family's second son, but unexpectedly, he investigated every member of the Tang family. The Tang family was the #1 family in City B for a reason. It was highly influential whether in politics, business, or military. The head of the Tang family was Tang Haifeng, who was precisely Master Tang that Gu Ning had already met. There were 2 sons and 1 daughter in the Tang family. The eldest daughter was called Tang Yinrong, a 49-year-old senior colonel, who was the deputy head of the Air Administration and Culture Corps. Her husband, Chao Ruihua, was the director of the political department of the military region and also a senior colonel. The Chao family was an influential military family in City B too. They had a son and a daughter. Their son was named Chao Wenjun and was a 25-year-old captain of the criminal police organization. Their daughter was Chao Wenxin and was 23 years old. She had just graduated from a university. Tang Yunhang, the eldest son of Tang Haifeng, was 46 years old and secretary of the provincial party committee. Tang Yunhang's wife was the director of the tourist administration. They had 2 sons who were twins and both were 22 years old. The older one was called Tang Jiakai, and the younger one was called Tang Jiayang. One was a junior studying in City B University, while the other studied abroad. Tang Haifeng's second son was Tang Yunfan. He was only 42 years old, but was the richest man in City B. He was now the chairman of Tang Huang Group and didn't have a wife or children. Tang Yunfan had indeed disappeared once 19 years ago, which wasn't a secret among the celebrities in City B. The Tang family wasn't the #1 family in City B 19 years ago, but was still a super-rich family. Tang Yunfan was the most talented one in business among the Tang family, so Tang Haifeng brought Tang Yunfan up to be his successor. However, Tang Haifeng's younger brother, Tang Haiming, had the ambition to inherit the Tang family's properties, so he had schemed against Tang Yunfan. No one really knew the details of what had happened during that year, because it was an old story and the technology hadn't been advanced that time. Even Tang Yunfan himself forgot the details. It was said that someone had discovered Tang Yunfan at a river. Since then, Tang Yunfan's personality had totally changed. He was occupied by his work all the time and never got married or had a child. Within a dozen years, the Tang family developed to be the #1 family in City B with 100 billion yuan in assets under Tang Yunfan's leadership. He has disappeared for a year 19 years ago and was found at a river? Thinking of that, Gu Ning was more certain than ever that Tang Yunfan could be her biological father. There was a family photo attached to the email too. When Gu Ning's sight fell on Tang Yunfan, she was sure that Tang Yunfan without a doubt had to be her biological father. Although Tang Yunfan looked different in his early 40s than when he had been young, it was easy to notice that his and Gu Ning's features were alike. Gu Ning's family name was Tang in her previous incarnation, and her biological father also had the same family name. Maybe she was destined to be a member of the Tang family. Although Gu Ning was sure that Tang Yunfan was her biological father, she wasn't in a hurry to meet him because she wanted to know how Gu Man would react. Tang Yunfan lost his memory of Gu Man after all. Gu Ning believed that Tang Yunfan never got married because of Gu Man, but she still needed to take it seriously. As long as Tang Yunfan met Gu Man again, he could probably get his memory back. In addition, if he lost his memory because his brain had been damaged, Gu Ning's power could also be of great help. Most importantly, if Tang Yunfan was just a common man, Gu Man would be eager to meet him, but Tang Yunfan was now the heir of a super-rich family. Gu Ning was worried that Gu Man would be self-abased before him. Although Gu Ning didn't think that it was a problem at all as long as they still loved each other, she wasn't Gu Man and couldn't force her to think so. No matter what, Gu Ning made up her mind to support Gu Man and she would never allow anyone to despise Gu Man. Gu Ning then went back to the Street of Stone gambling with Xingping before she left, alone. However, just as Gu Ning walked to the entrance of the street, a person dashed at her with a knife in their hand shouting, "Bitch! I'll kill you!" People around were all shocked by the scene, but Gu Ning stayed calm. Wang Xinyan was really stupid. Gu Ning didn't escape. Instead, she waited for Wang Xinyan to approach near. Just when Wang Xinyan was about to stab her, Gu Ning grabbed her waist like lightning and twisted it. Wang Xinyan immediately screamed in pain. The knife was also loosened from her hand, falling down onto the floor. Everyone was amazed by Gu Ning's sudden movement. Gu Ning then threw Wang Xinyan away heavily without hesitation. In the old days, Wang Xinyan would be crying already, but she didn't do it now. Instead, she glared at Gu Ning and questioned, "Bitch, was it you? Did you expose all of our Wang family's dirty secrets?" People were all astonished, looking to Gu Ning. Gu Ning was just a teenage girl in their eyes. How could she be able to unseat the Wang family? Up-to-date OVLS on OVL.bin.cm. Gu Ning didn't care about the onlookers, but stared at Wang Xinyan coldly. "Do you have any proof?" In fact, she understood Wang Xinyan's feelings, because she had caused the Wang family's tragedy and Wang Xinyan lost her powerful family's support forever, but it didn't mean that Gu Ning would tolerate her stupid attack. Wang Xinyan deserved it after all. "I heard it from my grandpa. It was you. You revenged yourself on the Wang family." Wang Xinyan didn't know much. She had just heard that Gu Ning might have been involved in the mess of the Wang family, so she assumed that it had to be Gu Ning. Hearing that, everyone took a long breath in with astonishment. Although they couldn't believe that it was true, it was possible if Wang Xinyan heard it from Wang Hongming. However, how did she, a teenage girl, do it? Nobody knew the answer. "Oh, why don't you tell everyone what the Wang family did to me to make me get revenge on you?" Gu Ning teased. Her airy tone confused the crowd all of a sudden. Gu Ning wasn't afraid of others knowing that she had exposed the dirty secrets of the Wang family, because it would only make them be in awe of her, but it wasn't appropriate if she admitted right away. "Because I told the policeman to arrest you," Wang Xinyan said. That was the only thing she could think of that had annoyed Gu Ning. Well, it was no big deal. "I wouldn't get revenge on the Wang family just because of that," Gu Ning said with disdain. Actually, she admitted that she had revenged herself on the Wang family with ambiguity in her reply. "My grandpa said you were involved in it. It must be you." Wang Xinyan was mad. "It seems your grandpa thinks highly of me, but since your grandpa doesn't want to mess with me, aren't you afraid I'll throw you into jail after what you've just done to me? You're an adult, and you should know that it breaks the law if you tried to kill me on purpose," Gu Ning said in a meaningful way. Hearing that, Wang Xinyan's face changed completely. The last thing she wanted to do was to be thrown into jail. Right at this moment, they heard the police sirens. Someone had called the police when Wang Xinyan had tried to stab Gu Ning, and the policemen immediately came over once they heard that the killer was from the Wang family. Everyone couldn't wait to punish the Wang family now. Wang Xinyan instantly stood up from the ground in fear, trying to escape, but was stopped by the crowd. "Get away! Get out of my way!" Wang Xinyan urged anxiously. "Don't you dare leave after you tried to kill the girl. The Wang family is totally disgusting. They all should be arrested and thrown into jail." A middle-aged woman ran to Wang Xinyan and clenched her teeth criticizing, "Wang Xinyan, you deserve it. You've bullied my daughter for a long time, and now it's your turn to taste the feeling of shame." Exactly. Wang Xinyan's rude behavior was notorious around the street of stone gambling, so most of the residents hated her very much. Wang Xinyan was alone and helpless now. She was so scared of the people who were full of hatred towards her. Before long, the policemen arrived and took Wang Xinyan away without delay. Gu Ning followed them, going to the police station too, because she was the victim. "Let me go, or the Wang family will punish you." Wang Xinyan was so used to threatening people. "Gee, the Wang family? Do you think that the Wang family is still able to cause us trouble?" the policeman asked with disdain. You, Wang Xinyan was struck dumb now. Ha ha, Gu Ning laughed lightly. It was very funny that Wang Xinyan was so stupid. Wang Xinyan heard Gu Ning laughing at her and immediately turned to Gu Ning yelling, "Bitch! It's all because of you. It was you." Meanwhile, she even tried to attack Gu Ning again, but was controlled by the policeman beside her. Stay quiet. Although Wang Xinyan's movement was restricted, she kept swearing. Gu Ning gave her a cold glance and warned, "If you dare to swear at me one more time, I'll make sure that you are quiet forever." Wang Xinyan was terrified and shut her mouth at once. Even the policemen were scared by Gu Ning's cold voice. In a hearing room, a policeman was taking down Gu Ning's account according to the rules. Your name, age, and where are you from? The policeman asked. Gu Ning, 18, and I'm from City F, Gu Ning answered. Do you know the girl? What's your relationship with her? Why does she want to kill you? The policeman continued to ask. I've argued with Wang Xinyan twice. Once was in a restaurant where she tried to grab a private room that my boyfriend and I have reserved before her, but we just orally argued for a short time. After that, I've witnessed Wang Xinyan along with a group of people beating a girl on the street. I gave the innocent girl a helping hand and punched them. The next day, the Wang family sent policemen to arrest my boyfriend and me and intended to sentence us to jail without trial. The head of the Public Security Bureau heard of it and made a call to release us. Afterwards, the Wang family's dirty secrets were exposed, and the Wang family was unseated. My boyfriend helped me acquire the Wang family's raw material exploitation right, so the Wang family claimed that I got revenge on them. Therefore, Wang Xinyan came to kill me, Gu Ning said plainly. What she just said could all be found out easily, so it wasn't necessary for her hide, but as for the information which couldn't be found out, Gu Ning naturally wouldn't say it. Hearing that, the two policemen who were taking Gu Ning's account down were both surprised. To their astonishment, this young girl before their eyes was exactly the one that the head of the Public Security Bureau had made a call to release, and she even got the Wang family's raw material exploitation right before anyone else. She couldn't be an ordinary girl. The two policemen immediately changed their attitude and wore a kind smile. They let Gu Ning leave at once without questioning her further. It didn't matter whether Gu Ning was telling the truth or not, it was undeniable that Wang Xinyan had tried to kill her. They had collected all the evidence, so Wang Xinyan was arrested directly. She was doomed to be sentenced to years in prison. The terrible news hit the Wang family heavily once more. They all hated Gu Ning to death, but they couldn't do anything, because there was only Wang Hongming who was lying sick in bed along with a bunch of useless women in the Wang family now. Xing Ping, Teng Haifeng, Zhang Deqing and Yan Shuya all called Gu Ning after they heard of the news. Hearing that Gu Ning was fine and safe, they all relaxed. Around 6 p.m., Wang Jinmao delivered a truck of raw materials to their warehouse. When they were moving raw materials, Gu Ning put all of the raw materials with top-level jade into the small warehouse. She planned to cut out that jade herself and make it into jewelry. And she would supply other jewelry businessmen with the rest. She was running many kinds of business concerning jade now, and it was necessary for her to make good arrangements. Although the boss of the Wang family's raw material provider had changed, the Wang family's clients stayed. However, some of them were worried that the colorful raw material provider would provide all the raw materials with jade inside for the colorful jade provider and leave only the waste raw materials for them. However, Xingping promised that they would treat their clients fairly. Leng Xiaoting had left for his task 2 days ago. He hadn't come back, nor called or sent Gu Ning a message yet. Gu Ning understood that he must be occupied by his task, so she didn't call or text him either. In the morning, Gu Ning received Master Tang's call. Master Tang was going back to City B soon, and he invited her to have a meal together before he left. Gu Ning had mixed emotions now after she found out that Master Tang was her biological grandpa. Although it was Tang aiming in Gu Ning's body now, they shared the same body and feelings. "Girl Gu, come on and have a seat." Tang Haifeng was excited and happy to see Gu Ning every time. He even stood up to welcome her in person. "Grandpa Tang, please stay seated." Gu Ning immediately walked over and helped Tang Haifeng sit down. Visit novilbin.c/m for the L-test updates. "Just call me Grandpa." Tang Haifeng complained a little. "Sure, Grandpa," Gu Ning said again. "Haha, that's great. What do you want to have?" "I'm leaving for City B this afternoon, and I don't know when I can meet you again." Tang Haifeng was slightly sad. Gu Ning didn't want to see Tang Haifeng being sad, so she promised. "Grandpa, once I finish the National College entrance exam, I'll visit you in City B." "I promise." Sure. Tang Haifeng was cheered up. The two then enjoyed the meal while chatting in harmony. However, every time Tang Haifeng saw Gu Ning, he thought of Tang Yunfan and couldn't help sighing sometimes. Gu Ning understood why Tang Haifeng sighed, but didn't ask further in case he would be sadder. However, Gu Ning couldn't ignore it for very long, so she asked in the end, "Grandpa, why do you sigh frequently? Do you have an unhappy memory in your mind? Would you mind telling me?" In fact, Tang Haifeng was willing to talk with Gu Ning about his worries. "Well, I'm just thinking of my second son. He works all day, all the time. I'm concerned about his health if he's occupied by work 24/7. Besides, he's already 42 now, but he refuses to get married or have children. As his father, I know he actually feels lonely even though he's busy working and looks fine." Tang Yunfan had been living his life for more than a decade, and Tang Haifeng should have gotten used to it earlier on, but Tang Haifeng was an aging old man. He thought that his life was about to end soon, and he was so worried about his second son, Tang Yunfan. Hearing that, Gu Ning had sympathy for Tang Yunfan. And exactly because of what Tang Yunfan had been through, Gu Ning didn't have dissatisfaction towards him because he had abandoned Gu Man. Tang Yunfan himself didn't want it to happen after all. "Why does he refuse to get married?" Gu Ning asked. "We have no idea, because he won't tell us, but I think that he doesn't know the reason why he's reluctant to be married either. In the beginning, we even doubted his sexual orientation, but he isn't gay," Tang Haifeng said resignedly. As Tang Yunfan's father, he didn't understand why his son refused to get married either. Maybe he already fell in love with a woman but couldn't be with her, so he refuses to get married now, Gu Ning said. "I had the same idea before. I investigated it, but failed to find any clues," Tang Haifeng replied. "Master, I think that it has something to do with Lord Tang's lost memory," Tang Wu said. It was a previous guess, but lacked evidence so nobody believed it. Tang Haifeng felt sadder and sighed. "Grandpa, don't worry. Life is full of changes. Maybe your son will change his mind one day in the future." Gu Ning comforted Master Tang, although she knew that it was meaningless. If Tang Haifeng was able to let it go, he wouldn't be so sad now. Indeed, Master Tang understood what Gu Ning had just said, but he still had to accept the truth. In order to not upset Gu Ning, Tang Haifeng pretended to be happy. "Sure. Life is full of changes. Although it's a shame that Yunfan refuses to get married, I won't force him to do so." Gu Ning understood that Master Tang was pretending and immediately changed the depressing topic. After the meal, Tang Haifeng gave Tangwen a knowing glance, and Tangwen immediately took out a box the size of a palm, handing it to Tang Haifeng. "Girl Gu, since you're my granddaughter now, this is a gift I am giving you as your grandpa," Tang Haifeng said to Gu Ning. "There are 2 cards in it. One is a black card for the Huangdang Hotel. You can have free accommodation, meals and drinks in the Huangdang hotel chain across the country. The other one is a black card for the Fengshan shopping mall. You can shop there for free for your entire life. However, the monthly limit is 100,000 yuan. It isn't much, but just my little gift. Please accept it, if you really regard me as your grandpa. Gu Ning didn't know what to say, but could only take it. She didn't know that the Tang family owned the Huangdang Hotel until now. Huangdang Hotel was a 5-star hotel chain and expanded across every city above 3rd tier. And the Fengshan shopping mall was also a well-known brand in this country. Tang Haifeng was indeed generous. With the 2 cards, Gu Ning could eat, drink, live and shop for free in this country. Tang Haifeng was generous, and Gu Ning would also give him a valuable gift. Thank you so much, Grandpa. I've prepared a gift for you too. Please accept it, if you really regard me as your granddaughter, Gu Ning said, and took a box out of her backpack, giving it to Tang Haifeng. Really? What is it? Tang Haifeng was surprised. He opened the box, and there was a red object the size of 3 fingers in it. Before Tang Haifeng could ask, Gu Ning opened her mouth again. It's natural red coral. I plan to make a bracelet from it for you, but the time is limited, so I can only give you the raw material. Please don't mind. What? Natural red coral? Tang Haifeng was astonished this time. Both Tang Wen and Tang Wu were shocked as well. They had all heard of the natural red coral, which was extremely rare and expensive. Gu Ning's gift was worth at least millions of yuan. F0 Low New Hapters at nov/el/bin/.com. This is too expensive. Tang Haifeng thought that it wasn't necessary for Gu Ning, who was just a teenage girl, to give him such an expensive gift. Grandpa, please take it. If you don't want my gift, I'll give your gift back to you too, Gu Ning deliberately said, and took out Master Tang's gift at once. Tang Haifeng immediately stopped her and said, Fine, I'll take it. Obviously, Gu Ning had already prepared the gift for him, which touched Tang Haifeng deeply. They then chatted for a while longer before they separated. Gu Ning proposed to send Tang Haifeng to the airport, but was declined because Tang Haifeng didn't want to waste her time. After that, Gu Ning went to her factory building. She had planned to make money by stone gambling in City Ting within 3 days, but unexpectedly, a lot had happened and she had spent a week in City Ting. Luckily, the result wasn't bad. Gu Ning had actually not intended to unseat the Wang family, but the Wang family had kept annoying her, so she had to do it in the end. So now Gu Ning had already finished her business in City Ting and decided to leave for the capital. Although her companies in City Ting were all newly established, she wasn't worried about them at all, because most people were in awe of her after she got the Wang family's raw material exploitation right like lightning. However, Lin Xiaoting wasn't back yet, so Gu Ning would wait until he came back. That afternoon, Lin Xiaoting called Gu Ning and told her that his task was fulfilled. It was time for dinner, so Gu Ning told Lin Xiaoting to meet her at a restaurant beside the hotel where they stayed. Half an hour later, Gu Ning arrived and Lin Xiaoting was already waiting for her. Once she opened the door, her eyes met his. They had missed each other so much even though they had just been apart for 2 days. Maybe it was because they were madly in love now. However, there was a waiter in the private room. Otherwise, Lin Xiaoting would have run over and hugged Gu Ning in his arms. The minute that the waiter left, Lin Xiaoting couldn't wait and immediately pressed Gu Ning to him. He held her body tightly. After a while, seeing that Lin Xiaoting had no intention to let her go, Gu Ning struggled a little. All right, if the waiter comes in suddenly, it'll be embarrassing. Lin Xiaoting then let her go reluctantly. If they hadn't been in a public place, Ling Xiaoting would have done much more than just hugging her tightly. Even though Ling Xiaoting sat apart from Gu Ning, his eyes were fixed on her. Like if he moved his sight away, Gu Ning would disappear. Gu Ning felt uneasy and asked, "Why are you staring at me all the time?" "I want to look at you," Ling Xiaoting said gently with affection. "I forbid you to do that," Gu Ning pretended to be mad. "No, I insist." Ling Xiaoting still fixed his eyes on Gu Ning. Gu Ning laughed and left it. "When will you be leaving for the capital?" "No idea, but I'm free now." Ling Xiaoting had told Su Jinchen and the others to go back to the capital, but he stayed. Ling Xiaoting had always been mysterious, so Su Jinchen and others just gossiped sometimes but didn't ask further. They understood that Ling Xiaoting was involved in both military and business. In fact, Ling Xiaoting had many things to deal with, but he didn't need to deal with them in person, so he cleared his schedule to keep Gu Ning company. Follow U Stories at n/VELB/in.com. "I'm free too, and I'm going to the capital tomorrow," Gu Ning said. "Sure, then we can go to the capital together," Ling Xiaoting said. Before long, the dishes were on the table. Ling Xiaoting had ordered many for Gu Ning. During the meal, Ling Xiaoting kept putting different dishes into Gu Ning's bowl, and they soon piled up. "What are you doing?" "I'm not a pig." Gu Ning was a little mad. "Don't worry. You can eat as slowly as you want. You're so slim and I'm worried that you're not really eating normally." Ling Xiaoting ignored Gu Ning's complaint. Gu Ning was slim, but she was healthy too. Moreover, she was satisfied with her body. "I don't think that I'm too slim. I think my body is fine," Gu Ning retorted. Hearing that, Ling Xiaoting's sight scanned Gu Ning's body from head to toe. Gu Ning flushed and immediately dropped the topic. The next day around 8 a.m., Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting left together for the airport. Xingpeng, Gao Yi and Xiaoyu would help Gu Ning manage her business in City Tang while she was absent. The Wang family was totally doomed, so her companies would be safe. Before she left, Gu Ning also called Zhang Diqing to say goodbye. Zhang Diqing invited her to have a meal together, but the time was limited, so he was disappointed when she declined. Zhang Diqing had already made up his mind to make friends with Gu Ning. Gu Ning had spent a week in City Tang, and she had to be back to City F 5 days before the New Year festival, so she could only stay in the capital for another week. When they were getting aboard, Gu Ning had mixed emotions, because she was heading to the place which she was most familiar with in her previous incarnation. She didn't know whether she would meet her enemies, nor her reaction when she really met them. Although now she thought that she wouldn't lose her mind, she had no idea whether she could stay calm when they appeared in her sight. Would she lose control and attack them? Thinking of Qi Ziyue and Tang Yaxin, Gu Ning couldn't help being mad. "What's wrong?" Ling Xiaoting held her hand in his palm and asked worriedly, having sensed her emotional change. "Nothing. I'm just wondering how I can find a good office building for my company in the capital." Gu Ning smiled to him. "Let me help," Ling Xiaoting said without hesitation. "Sure, thanks." Gu Ning didn't reject. The capital fell within the spread of Ling Xiaoting's influence, and it would be much easier for him to handle something than if Gu Ning did it herself. Gu Ning understood that she should make full use of her network. Ling Xiaoting was happy that Gu Ning agreed. However, Gu Ning didn't relax even though Ling Xiaoting was with her. She still felt nervous and angry. It took 2 hours to fly from City Tang to the capital. Gu Ning wasn't in a good mood, and didn't feel like talking, so she leaned against Ling Xiaoting's shoulder and closed her eyes. Ling Xiaoting thought that Gu Ning was tired, so he didn't bother her. Both Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting sat in first class. Gu Ning sat by the window and Ling Xiaoting sat by the aisle. There was a young and stylish beauty that was around 27 years old sitting across the aisle from Leng Xiaoting. When she noticed him, her eyes lit up. This man is so sexy and handsome. She had seen many good-looking guys, but none of them could compare with the one in front of her eyes. He was so attractive. In addition, people who sat in the first class must either be rich or powerful. If she could have a relationship with him, it would be of great help to her too. "Hi, this is my name card. Why don't we make friends with each other?" The woman wore a perfect smile, making eyes at Leng Xiaoting. She didn't care about Gu Ning, who was obviously his girlfriend, at all. However, Leng Xiaoting ignored her. The woman felt embarrassed, and her hand with the name card stiffened in the air. She had never been humiliated in public like that. Gee, what a blind bitch. Apparently this handsome man isn't single. A female voice sounded from the seat behind Leng Xiaoting. She was also a young woman that was around 25 years old and dressed simply, but her clothes were all designer brands. She hated to see flirts. "It's none of your business," the woman glared and snapped at her. "It is. Because I felt disgusted and I'm afraid that I'll be sick," the woman behind Leng Xiaoting said ironically. "What did you say?" The woman was mad and stood up abruptly, like she was going to beat her. However, before she could move, a flight attendant interrupted her. "Miss, the plane is about to take off. Please fasten your seat belt." The woman glared at the other woman who sat behind Leng Xiaoting and sat back in her own seat. She even swore at Leng Xiaoting in a low voice, "Just a stupid man." Gu Ning heard it and opened her eyes looking at the woman coldly. The woman was scared and immediately turned her head away. Her heart was beating very fast, as if she just had survived death. She tried to flirt with Leng Xiaoting, but was ignored, so Gu Ning didn't want to waste time on her. Seeing Gu Ning being a little mad, Leng Xiaoting was also unhappy. "What the f***ck? I've never seen such a shameless flirt. What a bitch," the woman who sat behind Leng Xiaoting couldn't help swearing. The woman who sat beside Leng Xiaoting was furious, but once she turned, she met Gu Ning's cold glance, which scared her. The plane finally took off. And around 1.5 hours later, the plane encountered severe turbulence during the flight. Everyone was terrified, screaming. Gu Ning abruptly sat upright in fear, and Leng Xiaoting clasped her hand trying to comfort her. Luckily, they were all seated when the plane encountered the turbulence, so nobody was injured. They thought that it was just normal turbulence, but unexpectedly, just seconds later, the plane encountered more severe turbulence. Some passengers were even weeping after that. At this time, a flight attendant announced on the radio, "Dear passengers, please do not worry. The plane is encountering airflow, so it's a little unsteady. Please fasten your seat belt, and do not leave the seat. Please stay quiet, and thank you for your cooperation." Just a little unsteady? It was severe turbulence and happened twice consecutively. The flight attendant's announcement failed to comfort the passengers in the plane. Will the plane fall straight down? I don't want to die. My good life just began, the woman who sat beside Leng Xiaoting across the aisle cried. However, the woman who sat behind Leng Xiaoting immediately snapped at her, "Shut your mouth. It won't fall down. Stop talking *shit. Get the latest chapters on n/velben.com. Both Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting wore a serious expression. They had a great sense for danger and it was obvious that they were in a dangerous situation right now. Gu Ning's face started to turn pale, and her body was trembling. It wasn't easy for her to be reborn, and she had just begun to run her businesses. She hadn't gotten her revenge yet, and wasn't willing to die in an accident like this. "No. Ning Ning, don't worry. You sit here and I'll find out what's going on, Leng Xiaoting said and stood up, walking to the cab. However, just as he walked to the entrance of the cab, he was stopped by a flight attendant who was seated by the door. Sir, please go back to your seat. Leng Xiaoting directly took out his military officer certificate, and the flight attendant was surprised. Leng Xiaoting was so young and he was already a major general. What is going on? Leng Xiaoting asked. Knowing Leng Xiaoting's identity, the flight attendant didn't dare to hide the truth. There are several flying birds, and the pilot is trying to avoid them, which is causing the severe turbulence. This is my flying license. I need to have a look. Leng Xiaoting showed them his other license and decided to walk inside in case any accident happened. Sure. The flight attendant immediately opened the door for Leng Xiaoting. Gu Ning also heard what the flight attendant had said, and she knew that it was very dangerous if the plane encountered flying birds. According to the momentum theorem, if a 0.45 kilogram bird collided with an aircraft moving at 800 kilometers per hour, it would cause an impact of 153 kilograms. If a 7 kilogram big bird hit jet moving at 960 kilometers per hour, the impact would rise up to 144 tons. In that case, a sparrow alone was able to crash the engine of the plane if it impacted with it. If the bird was drawn into the engine through the air intake of the aircraft's turbine, it would cause damage to the blades, which was worth dozens of thousands of yuan each due to distortion. It could also force the engine to stop. If the bird caught fire in the machine, the plane would crash and explode. In other words, a flying bird could cause a serious flight accident. Facing such an emergency, Gu Ning had no solution, but she trusted that Leng Xiaoting would handle it well. There were two pilots, a pilot in command as well as a co-pilot, and an observer in the cab. However, the pilot in command had hit his head and he had fainted during the second turbulence. The observer was pulling the captain out of his chair and the co-pilot was flying the plane. Hearing that the door was being pushed open, the observer turned around and noticed a flight attendant guiding a stranger inside. He snapped at once, "What's wrong with you? Don't you know that passengers can't enter the cab?" Before the flight attendant could explain, Leng Xiaoting directly showed him his flight license and military officer certificate. "I can help." Seeing Leng Xiaoting's flight license and military officer certificate, the observer was amazed but closed his mouth. The plane would still suddenly shake and bump, but it was obviously lighter than before. However, it didn't eliminate the passengers' fear, and some were still scared and screaming. All of a sudden, a person raised her voice, "Jesus! Someone just hit his head and is bleeding." Hearing that, Gu Ning immediately unfastened her seatbelt and strode to the injured man. "Is there any doctors on this plane?" a flight attendant asked loudly. The injured man was around 20 years old and there was blood coming out of the left side of his head. Gu Ning took out the small medicine box from her backpack at once and said to the flight attendant, "Let me through. I can help him." Gu Ning sounded determined. "You? Stop kidding. You're just a teenager." The flight attendant doubted her ability. "I can take the responsibility if anything bad happens to him," Gu Ning added. "How can you be responsible for the result?" the flight attendant replied with disdain. Up.to.dfrm no/v/e/lb I n.co/m. Other passengers around them also didn't believe Gu Ning, but they were busy looking after themselves in such a dangerous situation. Time was precious, and Gu Ning stopped arguing with the flight attendant. She moved the flight attendant's arms and gave her a cold glance. The flight attendant lost her breath at once and was struck dumb, standing still. Gu Ning then checked the man's wound. The wound wasn't new and the man must have been hurt in the same place a short time before. It was sutured, but it hadn't completely healed yet. So after the knock during the turbulence, the wound suddenly broke open. Gu Ning took out a cotton swab and hydrogen peroxide to clean the wound, and then used gauze to wrap it up. While doing that, Gu Ning secretly put her power into the wound to stop it from bleeding and relieve his pain. However, in order to not reveal her secret, Gu Ning didn't directly heal his wound, but only prevented the wounds from deteriorating. Before long, the man regained consciousness. Although he was dizzy because of the pain just then, he clearly knew what was happening, so he thanked Gu Ning at once. "Thank you so much." Seeing that the man was awake, people began to believe in Gu Ning's ability. "Oh! Someone is having a heart attack." However, just after Gu Ning finished wrapping the man's wound, another passenger was in danger. Under the violent bumps and turbulence, it was easy to cause diseases such as heart attacks and high blood pressure. Without further ado, Gu Ning went to the person who was having the heat attack. This time, nobody dared to stop her, or doubt her ability. The man who was having a heart attack was around 50 years old, and Gu Ning recognized his face. He was Liu Zhan, a famous domestic director, and many of his films had won accolades domestically and abroad. However, he had annoyed an important figure of power 2 years ago, so he had been forbidden to shoot films till now. Gu Ning squatted before him and pressed on his chest with her hands in a regular pattern. Of course, she used the movement to disguise the fact that she was secretly putting her power into his chest. Like what had happened to Tang Haifeng before, once the power flew into his chest, Liu Zhan gradually caught his breath and went back to normal. Passengers around them were all amazed by the scene. However, before Gu Ning was able to remove her hands, another person in the plane fainted as well. When the plane had encountered the flying birds, which caused violent bumps and shaking, the pilot had already contacted the airport tower and sent out an emergency help signal. And now, the plane's accident was announced at the capital airport. The latest news: a plane flying to the capital encountered a flock of birds in the air. The plane has encountered severe turbulence multiple times. The pilot in command passed out by accidentally knocking his head, and the co-pilot is controlling the plane. Currently the plane is still in danger, and there are 267 passengers and 12 staff members in the plane. Meanwhile, there was a list of passengers' names shown on the LED screen in the hall. The minute the news was released, everyone was shocked. Although the plane hadn't crashed, it was still in danger. Besides, what if some passengers suddenly had a heart attack or some other urgent disease during the turbulence? Everyone was worried about the safety of the people in the plane, especially the passengers' families and friends who came to pick them up. Su Jinqian's cousin, Su Qinin, came to the airport to pick up her best friend who just flew back from abroad and heard the terrible news. She read the list of passengers' names at the same time. The Su family and the Ling family had known each other for generations, so Su Qinin was familiar with Leng Xiaoting too. She was shocked when she saw Leng Xiaoting's name on the LED screen. Without delay, Su Qinin called Su Jinqian. Because of the anxiety, she was trembling and her phone almost fell. Su Jinqian was watching TV in his home when his phone suddenly rang. Seeing that the caller was Su Qinin, there was a gentle smile on Su Jinqian's lips. However, before he could say a word when he answered the call, Su Qinin said in a trembling voice, "Jinqian, Xiaoting is on a plane from City Ting to the capital now, but the plane encountered a flock of flying birds. It also encountered severe turbulence, and is still in danger now." "What?" Su Jinqian jumped up from his sofa horrified. "How is it possible? Why?" "I'll be right there," Su Jinqian said, then ran outside, and almost knocked his father who was walking inside over. Su Jifan criticized, "Watch where you are going." However, within seconds, Su Jinqian disappeared from his sight. Su Jifan frowned. Apparently, it was an emergency. Su Jinqian drove to the airport at a high speed and crossed the roads even if the traffic lights were red. He kept praying for Leng Xiaoting's safety. Coincidentally, Sitiyi and Chu Xianfeng had just arrived at the airport in City G and they were leaving for City B. The accident that had happened to the plane from City Ting to the capital was also shown on the LED screen in the hall of the airport in City G, so both Sitiyi and Chu Xianfeng noticed the terrible news too. When they saw Gu Ning's name, they were shocked. Especially Sitiyi, his heart ached severely and his face turned pale at once. He didn't realize that he cared about Gu Ning so much until this moment. He immediately took out his phone to call Gu Ning. He hoped that they were different people who just had the same name. He wished Gu Ning, the one who he knew, were still safe and alive. However, Gu Ning's phone was powered off. Xianfeng, you go to City B first, I need to leave for the capital right now, Sitiyi said to Chu Xianfeng and turned around walking to ticket office without delay. Follow you stories at n/VELB/in.com. Chu Xianfeng understood his boss's affection towards Gu Ning, so he didn't stop him. Not to mention Sitiyi who liked Gu Ning, even Chu Xianfeng who regarded Gu Ning as his friend was worried about her safety. The news continued to be released in the following hours. It was reported that there was a passenger who knocked his head and the wound was bleeding badly, while there were other passengers who suddenly had a heart attack, fainted because of high blood pressure, or got injured and so forth. The ambulances together with a medical staff had to stay ready. Once the news was released, many people were more worried. If anyone had an urgent problem or injury in a flying plane, it was highly possible to die. Those who came to the airport to pick up their aged families were especially worried. They were greatly concerned about their family's safety. What should we do? Grandpa has hypertension. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Honey, there is a wound on our son's head, and it's not completely healed yet. What if it splits? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have urged him to come back today. Don't worry. He'll be fine. He will. A dozen minutes later, the plane was finally under control. Except for the passengers in the first class, the rest of the people had no idea that Leng Xiaoting was the hero. Although the crisis was resolved, everyone was still pretty nervous because the plane hadn't landed safely yet. Nobody knew whether there would be more accidents on the way to landing. It was an extremely painful period of time when they were waiting for the landing. And it was very strange that the plane had encountered such a large flock of flying birds, which had never happened before. In addition, it was a miracle that the plane had safely avoided so many flying birds. All in all, Gu Ning saved a young man with a head injury, Lu Zhan with heart attack, 2 elderly people with hypertension, and a woman with a dislocated wrist. As for other people who were only slightly injured, Gu Ning didn't have time to help them. And Gu Ning had consumed a lot of power, so her face turned pale. All of the injured passengers who had been rescued by Gu Ning thanked her continuously. Although nobody knew how Gu Ning had been able to rescue them, they all admired her bravery and ability. At this time, Leng Xiaoting walked out from the cab. He noticed that Gu Ning was in economy class, so he walked towards her at once. When he stopped before Gu Ning, he saw that her face was very pale and that she looked weak. His heart ached and he immediately held her in his arms, walking back to their seats. A flight attendant poured a cup of water for Gu Ning and thanked them for what they had done. When the news that the plane was safe and all the patients were rescued was announced in the airport of the capital, everyone was relieved, but nobody knew who had rescued them. Su Jinchen was halfway there when he received Su Qining's call again. Even though he got to know that the plane was safe now, he still drove at a high speed heading to the airport. He wouldn't relax until he saw Leng Xiaoting in person. Sitiyi had the same feeling. If he couldn't see Gu Ning with his own eyes, he wouldn't relax. Half an hour later, the plane had already entered the airspace above the capital. When the radio announced that the plane was about to land, everyone exclaimed and applauded with excitement. Gu Ning was finally relieved too. She had to admit that she was scared to death during that period of time because she had died once and now cherished life more than ever. In her previous incarnation, she had died with disappointment and animosity, but in this incarnation, she had already found her love and didn't want to die now. After resting for half an hour, Gu Ning was back to normal. Su Jinchen had already arrived at the exit and was waiting for Leng Xiaoting. He thought that Leng Xiaoting was alone, but when he saw Gu Ning, he immediately understood why his boss had been absent for so long. However, it wasn't the right time to gossip. Su Qining had already picked her best friend up, but she was worried about Leng Xiaoting, so she stayed with Su Jinchen and waited for him. Su Qining's best friend was named Qiu Yusen. She was 25 years old and 177 centimeters tall. She had a perfect body as well as a beautiful face, and was a well-known model domestically. Qiu Yusen had met Leng Xiaoting once, and couldn't forget him. She always wanted to meet him again. And she was coming back home for 2 months this time after she had studied abroad, but unexpectedly heard the terrible news about the plane. She was even more worried about Leng Xiaoting than Su Qining was. 15 minutes later, the plane landed safely at the airport in the capital. There were ambulances waiting already, and the injured passengers were sent to the hospital the minute that they got off the plane. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting instead left directly. Leng Xiaoting was tall and extraordinarily handsome. Once he appeared, he attracted a lot of attention from people around him and even caused a round of acclamation. Wow! He's so handsome. Is he a star or something? I think that he is more handsome than all the male stars that I've known. Exactly. Do you notice that he has an air of power and nobility? I think he's either a super rich man or a man of power. He's a perfect Mr. Charming. Ha ha. I think you've read too many romantic novels about Mr. Charming. Don't forget I'm a writer myself. The talk among those girls interested Gu Ning because Leng Xiaoting indeed had an air of natural nobility. In fact, he was both a super rich man and a man of power. It was hard to ignore him among people on the roads. I wish I had a boyfriend like him, the girl who was a writer said. The group of girls all complimented Leng Xiaoting in excitement. And some of them even followed Leng Xiaoting even though Gu Ning was by his side. They just wanted to have a closer look at him, like fans meeting their idol. When Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting walked to the exit, they noticed Su Jinchen and immediately realized why he was here. The moment that Su Jinchen saw Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning, he almost cried. Xiaoting! Su Qining raised her voice in excitement. Qiu Yusen also saw Leng Xiaoting, but her smile was frozen on her face when she noticed that Leng Xiaoting held Gu Ning's hand. It was obvious that they were a couple. Although she didn't know much about Leng Xiaoting, she had heard a bit about him from Su Qining. Su Qining told her that Leng Xiaoting was always cold and never had a girlfriend, so they all believed that he would be single forever. At that time, Qiu Yusen thought that she still had a chance. She wasn't very clear about Leng Xiaoting's background, but he was Su Jinchen's best friend. Su Jinchen was from a super rich family, and so Leng Xiaoting had to be of the same level. In addition, Qiu Yusen's family was also a well-known rich family in City B, and she was a sexy beauty. She thought that she and Leng Xiaoting were perfect together. Indeed, although the Qiu family couldn't compare with the Leng family, there wasn't a huge gap either. Moreover, Qiu Yusen and Leng Xiaoting matched each other perfectly from appearance. Who is that girl? Su Qining was surprised to see Gu Ning. Leng Xiaoting never dated or had a girlfriend, but now, he held a girl's hand on his own initiative. Su Jinchen didn't answer her question, but walked straight to Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning. Xiaoting! Su Jinchen hugged Leng Xiaoting with great force. I'm fine, Leng Xiaoting comforted him. Su Jinchen then looked to Gu Ning. Hi, so nice to meet you again. I'm surprised that Shouting has abandoned us for you. Visit no.v3lb/n.cm for new OVL. Seeing that they were both safe and sound, Su Jinchen was in a good mood to tease them. He had had a sense that Leng Shouting treated Gu Ning differently, so he wasn't very shocked when they showed up like a close couple. Gu Ning smiled a little. Nice to meet you too. It's been ages. Indeed. Since you're in the capital now, let me be your guide. I'm free these days and I can. However, before he could finish, he received a cold glance from Leng Shouting and stopped all of a sudden. Su Jinchen quickly realized that Gu Ning was his boss's girlfriend now, and his boss would take good care of her. Shouting! Su Qinin called Leng Shouting. She admired and was in awe of him. Nice to meet you, Mr. Leng. Qiu Yusin greeted Leng Shouting politely. She didn't show her admiration towards him at all. Leng Shouting glanced at them and answered lightly. He was familiar with Su Qinin, but had no impression of Qiu Yusin. Shouting, is this your girlfriend? Su Qinin took a look at Gu Ning and deliberately asked. Yes, Leng Shouting said seriously. Although they already knew the answer, they were still slightly surprised when Leng Shouting admitted it himself. Especially Qiu Yusin, her heart ached a little, but her face stayed calm. Hi, my name's Su Qinin. I'm Su Jinchen's cousin. May I know your name? Su Qinin said to Gu Ning. Su Qinin didn't know that Qiu Yusin liked Leng Shouting, and she had no position to interfere in their personal affairs. If Leng Shouting and Qiu Yusin liked each other, Su Qinin would absolutely support them, but Leng Shouting already had a girlfriend now, so she could do nothing about it. Nice to meet you. My name's Gu Ning, Gu Ning replied politely. Gu Ning behaved in an elegant way, and didn't seem like a teenager at all, which left a great impression on Qiu Yusin and Su Qinin. Gu Ning, this is my best friend, Qiu Yusin, Su Qinin introduced Qiu Yusin to Gu Ning. Nice to meet you, Miss Gu. Qiu Yusin opened her mouth first. She didn't take Gu Ning as her enemy just because she was Leng Shouting's girlfriend. Although she liked Leng Shouting and felt sad that he already had a girlfriend, she was a well-educated woman with great manners. She wouldn't get involved in their relationship as the other woman. Well, that's all for this part, truckers. See you all in the next video.